Thank you very much for coming so early when the temperature is just 15 degrees. We have a quorum and this is the appointed time already. Let me call the meeting to order. Let us invite the administration team to come in. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. That's the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of October 2013. It has been issued as paper CB bracket 1 499/13 to 14. We have not received any proposals for amendment. The minutes are now confirmed. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There are two. One CB bracket 1 407/13 to 14 bracket 01, a letter from Ms. Claudia MO proposing to discuss monitoring the use of the Environment and Conservancy Fund. This is already listed in the list of outstanding items. Another one, CB bracket 1 484/13 to 14 bracket 01, information paper on launching the Air Quality Health Index reporting system. It has been issued to members as well. Now, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next meeting of this panel will be on the 27th of January at 2:30 p.m. By that time, the Secretary will come along to give us a briefing on environment matters as contained in the CE's policy address. We will also look at the incident of leachate from the Northeast New Territories landfill. Mr. Secretary, this second item, will there be any prosecution cases that you will report to us, or are you going to report remedial measures only? Chairman, our established attitude is that within the appropriate time we will consider taking out prosecution. I hope you will give us that information later. Members, since the next meeting, which is on the 27th of January, we will have a briefing on this policy address and also the leachate from Northeast New Territories landfill. I believe members will have many questions on these, so we're going to extend the meeting to 5 p.m. In other words, the meeting will go on for 2.5 years. On the 19th of December at 3 p.m., we are going to pay a visit to the Sha Tin Refuse Transfer Station. Members, please note the itinerary. The clerk, can you take us through the itinerary? Is it that we are going to wait at the car park downstairs? Yes, where we usually board coaches. The front entrance, where there is a round shape. Members who have signed up, please be there punctually at 3 p.m. It is expected that we can come back by 4:45. And then the subcommittee on some environment legislation will start right after that. Item 4 on the agenda, and a discussion item, promotion of recycling industry. We have issued papers CB bracket 1 500/13 to 14 bracket 03 and also bracket 04. Now the Secretary for the Environment, or is it another colleague? Thank you. Good morning. The administration set up the steering committee to promote the sustainable development of the recycling industry in August 2013 to support the work of the steering committee and also to liaise with the recycling industry and also other stakeholders and also to coordinate the joint efforts of different government departments to look into policies and measures to support the recycling industry. It is proposed that in the EPD, we are going to have internal deployment of manpower, and also from 2014-15 to 2016-17, we'd like to create a supernumerary post for 3 years at ADEP bracket D2. We will take the opportunity to redeploy responsibilities internally for overseeing and implementing policies and programs relating to waste reduction and recycling for better coordination. The long-term manpower requirement after 2016-17 will be reviewed at a later stage, taking into account the progress of work and implementing the necessary initiatives and measures formulated by the steering committee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. Now the floor is open for questions. We don't have too much time for this item. It will be about 30 to 40 minutes. Every member will have 4 minutes. Any members who would like to ask questions? If not, I will ask questions. I have many questions. Secretary, you are saying that there would be the fund. In the past, it was 230 million, now 100 million this year. Of course, I'm from the Labour Party, and of course, I think members will also agree that there should be recurrent expenditure for promoting recycling. What is your consideration now? Chairman, this is a new initiative. It is an important initiative. We need manpower to support the work of the steering committee, which will liaise with the sector. In these 2 months, a consultant is getting the views of the sector in a systematic manner, trying to map out policy directions. So we need time to deal with this part of our work. I hope that next year I can have a more direct answer for you. In other words, in the policy address and the budget, you will not be able to include other initiatives. Well, I don't think I should divulge what the PA and the budget will contain, but in due course, I will be able to give you a more positive reply. You mean 2014, not 2015, huh? When you say next year, is it 2014? Next year is 2014. No, I'm worried that you mean 2015 because the PA is just around the corner. Some members have just come in. Just now, no members have raised their hands, so I'm asking questions. But if you should raise your hand, I will stop my line of questioning and give the floor to you. Next, para 18. The Secretary said that you will commission a consultant to do in-depth study. First of all, I'd like to know who is the consultant and whether you have tendered out the consultancy study. Are you sure who the consultant is now? And how much time will the consultant need? When will the consultant come with initial and final proposals? Because if the consultant takes a long time, then are we going to still make use of the Education and Conservancy Fund, or should we make use of in current expenditure? When will the consultancy study be completed?
I'll say a few words and then I'll defer to my colleagues. We'd like to formulate our policies as soon as possible, so the consultant has been commissioned and work has commenced. And Mr. Chan, please. We have commissioned the Productivity Council to conduct a consultancy study, which will last for 8 weeks, and in 2 months' time or so, we will be able to have a preliminary result. This consultancy report or consultancy study looks at the models of funding for the recycling industry and also the unique circumstances in different places of different sectors of the industry. For example, for plastics, waste papers, etc., they may have different characteristics. So if we are to provide support in the future, we should look at individual segments of the industry and implement suitable measures. And this is part of the analysis and of the consultancy study, together with recommendations. After receiving the report, we will have give it further considerations. 8 weeks starting from when? My greatest concern is whether it will be after the announcement of the budget or whether any reference will be drawn to this report in formulating the budget so that we know whether anything will be happening in the coming year. Thank you, Chair. The report or the consultancy study commenced in December, so it will be completed within January. So question for the Secretariat, when will the budget be announced? Should be the end of February. Well, Mr. Chen just now said that the study would be on the support, mode of support. Mode of support, does it mean that the administration will not be taking the lead and will not be done by way of tenders? Chair, I think we should not discuss specific details at this stage. We communicated with the sector and the industry to understand their operation, and we consider different approaches to providing support, including land and procurement, etc. And through these areas, we consider the concerns of the industry and our responsive measures. So you just repeated support and also the fund, and nothing about recurrent expenditure. Any questions from members, Mr. Wu Chi-wai? Now, on this paper about the study, the direction is just about improving or enhancing the existing approach. But Hong Kong is densely populated with limited land resources, and in remote areas, I understand it's not easy for operators to recruit manpower to work in Eco Park. So apart from direct support for the recycling industry, the administration should also consider some successful examples of segments of recycling industry, for example, waste paper, aluminium cans. They succeeded because the recyclables are valuables. So will the administration study in great detail their mode of operation in mapping out the direction? Secondly, we say we have deployed abundant resources on recycling of resources. We emphasize that they carry a value, but sometimes materials recycled may not actually carry a value because we don't have that industry in Hong Kong. It's part of waste management. So when our resources are deployed to support the recycling industry, we should consider deploying the resources as part of the effort in supporting resource recycling. So I'd like to seek the government's perspective on it. And thirdly, Madam Chair correctly pointed out just now whether we have a timetable or roadmap or not on the general recycling, general policy on recycling. For example, on MSW charging, the administration has pointed out that the whole legislative process will not be completed until 2015 or 2016 upon a consensus built in the community. And in the interim period, what will be done? Over the past 3 years, we see some result, but progress is slow. In the coming 3 years, will the administration have many specific measures to tackle that? Secretary. Mr. Wu, thank you for your question. The first question is the value of recycled materials and on how the market for some recyclables can be revitalized. And you're right, for certain segments, their markets are mature and the minimum intervention from administration is needed. As for others, they need support so that the recycled materials will carry value. And the steering committee is heading the discussion, and in due course, a timetable can be announced. On MSW charging and quantity-based charging, whether our initiative can tie in with the MSW charging. I think this is in response to the public aspirations. The steering committee will discuss the details, but we will, during this time, focus on quantity-based charging. I think you will keep watch of the time because you need to submit proposals on landfill extensions. However, if we see nothing new in the policy address of the budget, we'll be staying put. So just to remind them, anything to follow up, Mr. Wu? This item is scheduled to end at 9:20. And nobody's in the queue. Oh, actually, please be brief. Somebody just raised his hand. And Secretary, you just now said appropriate juncture. And this is our concern because we don't know when that will be. And Secretary also pointed out a very important point. You focus your effort on landfill. What about recycling? Do you have a specific timetable and specific measures to support the recycling industry? This will affect our decisions. So please tell us when appropriate juncture is, whether it can be resolved in 2 or 3 months' time. This paper contains a proposal to create a supernumerary post of ADEP at the rank of D2, and the whole division, there will be a new team comprising 33 posts through internal transfer and 22 time-limited or 3-year time-limited posts. And I think members will also like to follow up on this part. It's a new division. We have 3 members, Mr. Chan Kin-po, Tony Chair, and Mr. Chan Kin-po. I think we need to take a 2-pronged approach on waste management. We need to enhance awareness of the public in reducing waste at source. On the other hand, the administration should actively promote and support the recycling industry so that the recycled materials will carry a value and the business will be profitable. Operating this business in Hong Kong involves huge overheads, and government support is necessary. Well, a lot has been said in the paper, but I have a question. You talked about studying into the feasibility of setting up a fund to promote or to help the recycling industry. A more innovative approach should be adopted. Past initiatives have shown that limited support can be given, but this cannot create enough an incentive. If you want something like South Korea, in which the result actually doubled or tripled, you need to do something more. I hope you understand that you should give them actual support and make the business profitable in order to achieve result. Otherwise, all the waste recycled or collected will just go to landfills. Secretary, I think what Mr. Chan said is actually in line with our direction of coming up with new initiatives, and we need suitable size of manpower to formulate these policies and initiatives. The insurance sector also expresses this concern, and actually in Annex C of the paper, now the new division will be the 4th division, which is waste reduction and recycling. We hope that when the establishment is expanded, we can implement the specific policies and also help with training and minimize risks and have better coordination with the insurance sector and operational details. Be it training or fund, we need to take a multi-pronged approach. Anything to follow up, Mr. Chan Kim-po? I hope Secretary would fully understand that you need money to support them. Direct subsidy is necessary to keep the market vibrant, Mr. Yik Chi-ming. I think all our questions are similar. Secretary, you answered the 2 members' questions, but I think these are quite vague, as pointed out by Madam Chair or Mr. Wu Chi-wai. If you come back and submit the landfill proposals again, we can't support you unless you have some concrete initiative to tackle the problem. We've drawn reference from overseas, and we've also consulted members of the sector on recyclables in Hong Kong and what the industry is lacking. I don't think it's difficult to come up with something. Of course, you might be saving up something in your sleeve for the policy address. I emphasize you need something concrete. In para 8 of the paper, you talk about Community Recycling Network, CRN, in 2011, with recyclables collection points. However, how many tons of waste have been collected through the Community Recycling Network, and how many of the waste have been recycled?
Secretary, I'd like to see whether my colleagues have anything to add, but through different ways and means, including such networks and also our cooperation with the sector, as you know, we report the total volume of waste recycled every year. The one for last year, if I remember correctly, was 48%. Of course, that is the overall figure, and the figure is different for different types of waste. My colleague, Mr. Chan, thank you, Chairman. From 2005, we have rolled out the separation at source program, and 80% of places in Hong Kong are now served by separation bins. In 2011, we have started the CRN to join hands with the 18 districts, and there are more collection points in the community. There are over 500 collection points under the CRN. Hopefully, in housing estates and centers and communities, we can have this network. Moreover, in the housing estates, public or private, there are 200 of them which have taken part, and some others also have collection points even if they are not part of the network. If members have interest, we can provide detailed information for reference after the meeting. Good. I'd like to have the information. I read the paper. I think you have done a lot, but I think this may just be cosmetic. If you have hundreds of points, but then if you just recycle 30 kilograms of waste, then it's a waste of time. And where do they go, actually, the 30 kilograms collected? Do they end up in landfills? Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. promoting recycling is very important for reduction of waste. So basically, I support the effort. However, I have a few questions for the administration. Para 4, the PCWAs, public cargo working areas, I think they have been in use for some time now. Do you have information about its usage rate? Are vessels involved in recycling using these PCWAs? And also it is said that the lease will expire in 2016 and you talk about new arrangements. What kind of arrangements, please? In what direction are you thinking? That's the first point. Secondly, Para 7, you put in new legislative amendments in 2008 to tackle separation of waste at source. There are many single buildings which are not provided with these facilities, and in Paras 8 and 9 you mentioned the CRN. Does it mean that for single buildings that is all you can do for them because you think that is quite sufficient, or are you thinking of something else? Because some members have asked, is what you are doing already effective or responding already to the aspirations of the public in terms of convenience, in terms of providing the incentive to them? Also, Para 15, the ECF, in the past 5 years, 230 million for about 200 projects initiated by non-profit organizations and green groups. I'd like to know, in fact, this has been mentioned, training. The money spent, is it mainly for recycling per se or for training recycling workers? Because sometimes the recycled waste may be toxic. You need to deal with it in a certain way. So how do you monitor the 200 projects to see whether what they do is up to government standard? And there is one last point, and that is the creation of the AD post. The Waste Management Division is mainly responsible for formulating policies to tackle waste management. But now you have a new AD post. Why is it not in the same division and by expanding that division? Unit 55, non-directorate posts, and 33 will be deployed internally. But by doing that, are you going to affect the work of your department? From which division or section will these 33 people come? Because they should be doing something, and by redeploying them, well, I think you have just used up your 4 minutes. Many members are waiting in the queue. Mr. Secretary, you have got old buildings, training, and the new division, etc. I would propose that you answer the question on the AD post first, because that question has not been asked, and also the Secretary has not actually told us much about the post. So why don't you now let us know more about the new post? Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chen, with regard to waste reduction and recycling, the work is divided up amongst the different divisions. Under the Environmental Infrastructure Division, there is a waste management section which is responsible for education and publicity, and also the Eco Park. The other divisions also chip in. Mrs. Lau, who is sitting behind me, is responsible for cross-boundary and international affairs. And since we do not have a dedicated manpower, she is now doubling up as the secretary of the steering committee. When we have the new division, then the waste reduction education people now under the Environmental Infrastructure Division will be deployed to the new division, and plus the new posts, we will have the new division. So hopefully we can pool all personnel for waste reduction and recycling together. Can I please, Chairman, ask that if my questions cannot be answered at the meeting, can we have written replies? Yes, please wait in the second round. You still have a chance. Now I read out the names who are in the queue. Albert Chan, Lee Chek Yan, Christopher Chung. In the second round, Wu Chi Wai and Tony Chia. 4 minutes for members in the first round. Let's see how much time we have and decide on the second round. Albert Chan, Chairman. I'm just like Mr. Stephen Lam, and I will act like an audio tape recorder. Because I have been saying this for over 10 years. Recycling has everything to do with reduction of waste at source. You have been doing this and that, dabbing here and there in the past 10 years. I think you have wasted everybody's time and resources because you have not achieved anything. In fact, if you have separation at source, it will be so effective and cost-effective as well. You are doing it here and there in a piecemeal manner, so you are not achieving the desired results. You engage in a lot of publicity, division of work, organization. But once you have the legislative system to mandate separation at source, the recycling industry will flourish by itself. Because if you have separation at source, there will be a lot more cost effectiveness. At every estate, in every community, there should be appropriate and big enough space for recyclers to deal with recyclables. And then such will be transported to a central facility. But now in the community, you do not have these recycling points. Very often in old buildings, on the ground floor, you see shops operating as recyclers, but people living nearby are continuously complaining about noise and pollution. You do not do good planning, you do not have good policies, so members of the public are disturbed. Go to Young Oak Road, go to the recyclers there. Many people are complaining against it, but the nuisance continues. And this happens in many other areas, not just in Young Oak Road. Secretary, I think you are dedicated, but it seems that civil servants don't exactly support you, especially the FEHD, which is the biggest obstacle. I don't know whether you can do good housekeeping so that you can work together with the Undersecretary to really solve this problem which has been with us for over 10 years. Just throw away this paper. We don't need to look into the nitty-gritties. You need to set up the main framework and then the nitty-gritties will fall in place. It is so simple. Don't continue to dwell on the nitty-gritties. Don't continue to overlook the framework. And then 10 years, 20 years down the road, you will come back again with the same issues. If you have just a little wisdom, you will know that we are all wasting time. I give you like half a minute to respond. Secretary. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chan. We all want to find the correct solution. We hope recycling will be done in a more advanced way. That is why, in terms of establishment, we are creating one more division so we can focus on waste reduction and recycling. No, Secretary, you know you are talking nonsense. You do not have a system to separate waste at source. You may work a lot on recycling, but it is not cost effective. I am always talking about Llama Island, where people are voluntarily collecting glass bottles. The community works very hard, and a lot of bottles are collected, but FEHD doesn't support it. The program almost was killed off, and then with your intervention, Secretary, and the Undersecretary, it is now struggling to survive. That is the crux of the matter, and this is only about a small community collecting glass bottles. So you do not have the framework. Even if you continue to work, you are wasting everybody's time and resources, and you are not achieving any effect. I think this is time for you to wake up, Mr. Secretary. Show some determination. Make a tough decision to mandate separation at source, and everything will fall into place. Okay, thank you. We'll have to draw a line because some new members are in the queue. Now the order is Lee Cheuk-yen, Christopher Chong, Elizabeth Quat. 4 minutes each. That's all. Lee Cheuk-yen. Thank you, Chair. The Secretary said that they are trying to find an appropriate solution, but I think that's a joke. Are you going to find the right solution by having one more AD? If that's the case, then it will be so easy to solve any problem in the world. The biggest problem now is, now I have read your paper, I think you are just delaying matters. First of all, you have one more person, you have the steering committee, and you ask the consultant to do study. This is just what the administration always seeks to do. This is bureaucracies. I don't know what you're trying to say. You say there is the AD and the consultant, and then the crux of the matter, as we see it, is not what you are going to tackle, and I'm talking about food waste. If you don't tackle food waste, even if you are collecting plastic bottles, well, yes, that is also valuable, but to find a wholesome solution, you have, first of all, to tackle food waste. But I see hardly any mention of that in the paper, Mr. Secretary. I have said many times here, you need a top-down approach in all the private and public housing estates and all the streets in Hong Kong. The administration should plow in the resources. We are talking about $2 billion recurrent expenditure every year. Get all the manpower you need in every estate, and then you collect the food waste, and then you do also the separation of waste for other waste matters. That will be so easy once you deal with food waste, because the other waste matters will not be dirty and will be clean and recyclable. You say in 2016 in Northland Town, you will have this food waste treatment facility, but how much food waste can it take care of? I heard it may be a few hundred tons only. But then there are 3,000 tons produced, and you're not tackling even 1/5 of it. Now, my figures may not be correct. If you can collect the food waste, of course you're not collecting it at all, but even if you collect it, you have no treatment plant to deal with it, so what are you doing?
But if you have this package, then I think it's okay to create a post. If not, I don't think it will work. So please respond to the point on food waste, Secretary. I don't agree with Mr. Lee, because food waste accounts for a certain percentage of waste disposed at the landfill, but there are also other kinds of waste. So we mustn't only deal with food waste. And by the beginning of next year, we will be rolling out a targeted policy on food waste in response to Mr. Lee's question. It is not easy to implement this in Hong Kong, but we do have this arrangement. We'll be sharing with you in due course. We do have a targeted approach. It's not as easy as Mr. Lee puts it. You need to set up a fund, so on and so forth. It's not that easy. Sorry, Secretary. I know it's not that easy, but we need to see the whole package. You're not doing anything, and then you just tell us it's not so easy. So why don't I take your seat and I do the work? I know it's not that easy. You say food waste is not the key, but in fact food waste is the key. I went to Taiwan and asked, and the mayor of Taiwan said that the most important thing is to deal with food waste. If you can't separate food waste from others, you can't separate any waste. So you just tell me it's not easy to have the whole package. And I have made my point. You need to have the whole package. Response from the Secretary. In the very near future, we're going to have an enhanced arrangement on tackling food waste. That's the first point. Secondly, apart from food waste, I'm not saying that food waste is not important, but apart from that, we need to have appropriate measures, arrangements, and support for other types of waste. We're talking about the latter today. We are working on both, and we urge members support Mr. Christopher Chung. According to the paper, I think the whole paper about the steering committee is about MSW charging. Well, this can induce an immediate effect, just like a fare hike for taxis. In the first few weeks, there might be fewer passengers, and at first, a lot of members oppose MSW charging, and then, well, you said this is a must, and then things went ahead, and then when you ask for increase again, then definitely some members will be opposing it. So MSW charging it can only induce short-term effect, and your paper talks about recycling of resources. But I think that's not the point. The recycling industry is an industry. In the past, we rely on NGOs to operate the business, and now you should consider how you can incentivize the business sector in running the business and what profit they can make. And there are problems. For example, insurance. Recycling industry is regarded as a high-risk business, and the insurance premiums are very high. So things are fragmented within the industry. You engage the NGOs in education, but we're talking about tackling the problem. It's not just about education. You should put 80% of your effort in promoting the industry and 20% on education. How much plastic can be collected for recycling by NGOs now? So you need to have a new policy to give direct funding and land support. And I recalled last time I also made this point. You collect glass for eco-concrete pavers, and in fact a lot of energy is wasted in the process. In fact, you can collect glass and recycle them as glass or into glass materials. And there are factories in Shenzhen that just crushes the glass and have them recycled into glass instead of eco-concrete papers. We don't need too much land. We don't need high-tech facilities. So you should listen to the industry and understand what can be done to help them. And perhaps our government officials can discuss with mainland officials and collaborate in projects in which their government can provide land support and our government can provide funding support, so that we can help the recycling industry. Secretary, I generally agree with Mr. Zhong. That's why we've engaged a commission, a consultant, to get in touch with the industry instead of relying on NGOs, so that on different matters like insurance, land, how the administration can provide support to promote the industry. On recycling of glass, apart from eco-concrete pavers, we also consider how we can better utilize these resources against the backdrop of the industry in Hong Kong and Hong Kong circumstances. Dr. Elizabeth Quat. If the government is really committed this time in promoting the recycling industry and improving the recycling of waste in Hong Kong, then we definitely will support the administration's paper. However, Madam Chair, this paper doesn't contain much details. The only detail is that there will be a 3-month exercise for a consultancy study conducted by the Productivity Council. So, after the consultation exercise, does it mean that a blueprint will be drawn up for different types of waste, from high value added ones to low value added ones like food waste? Secretary, what the consultant can be completed in 8 weeks' time should have been completed by you long ago. Ms. Chen. Now, one important procedure in the consultancy study is for the consultant to discuss with different segments of the recycling industries on the type of recyclables and how the administration can provide support so that appropriate recommendations can be made to the government. The steering committee set up by the Chief Secretary for Administration will formulate blueprint to provide suitable support for the recycling industry. We keep an open mind, but the consultancy study is still yet to be completed. We don't have a conclusion at the moment, but the overall direction is to provide suitable support for different segments of the recycling industry in a targeted manner. Now, of course, the steering committee is something new, but throughout the years you have been trying to study the needs of the sector or segments of the industry. Anyway, back to paragraph 5 of the paper. A design, build, and operate model will be adopted to promote the industry, but it will be slow. In 2016, 2 facilities will be commissioned, but the facilities only deal with a small proportion of the recyclable waste in Hong Kong. So, can these facilities deal with all the waste? Otherwise, much waste will just go back to either landfills or incinerators in the future, and we can't really tackle the waste problem. So my question is, do you have a timetable or a blueprint on when waste in Hong Kong can be fully tackled? Secretary, the aim of the steering committee is to learn from past experience and formulate timetable and blueprint for the future. The steering committee has just been set up for a short time, and we have engaged a consultant to look into these matters. I think the major functions of the steering committee is about the consultancy report. Under the lead of the CS4A, the steering committee will seek help from the various policy bureaus, for example, land, from Development Bureau and funding from FSTB, etc., etc. Now, once the consultancy report is completed, and without the support of policy bureaus in the sense of providing policies and resources, it will be just a waste of time. What the consultant is going to say is already known to everyone. You just need to go through the motion. So you may follow the consultancy's report and give us all the resources and policies and initiatives needed, and have them submitted to LegCo for reference. Otherwise, it will be a futile effort if you submit landfill extension proposals again. Our members have asked for a second round, and Mr. Wu Chi-wai first. 1 minute. Very briefly, many members asked about policies on promoting the recycling industry. Well, we haven't heard anything concrete so far. Now, today we need to deal with the proposal to create a post. We don't have the specific details. I don't know whether we need to deal with the creation of posts today. But before anything concrete is known to us, or before there is any concrete proposal floated by the steering committee, I don't think it's appropriate if we endorse the creation of posts. Mr. Tony Chair, I asked 4 questions just now on creation of posts. I think it's not sufficient. There are 3 ADs at the moment. I haven't heard any clear division of work either. So, Secretary, perhaps you can supplement some information. Perhaps there is something new. Maybe currently there's something about infrastructure plans and how to execute them. I don't know whether there is any duplication, and I'm quite concerned about the division of work. So I have some reservations on the creation of posts. I think we need more information. For the remaining 3 questions, please supplement your answer in writing. Annex B, Annex C are both about the new posts. Mr. Christopher Chung, I agree with Chair that the administration relies only on steering committees to deal with interdepartmental work. In fact, we can promote something like artistic glass products as a tourism initiative. We can engage the private sector, just like the island in Venice. So we can add an artistic element, but this requires help and coordination among bureaus. Well, today the proposal is about creation of a post, but judging from members' comments, I think that the administration would need to give more information. This proposal will not go to ESC for the time being.
We need more information from you. There is going to be a team of 55. We'd like to know from which divisions and sections the 33 will come, and what are the original duties and how the duties will be collated and to form the division. And then the 22 posts will be for a period of 3 years. Why 3 years? Is it that after those 3 years, you don't need those 22 people anymore? So because the work will be completed. I have a big question mark here. I like the Secretary to submit the additional information ASAP. Just now I have not heard anyone saying that they support the submission of the paper to the ESC. Have I interpreted your stance correctly? Who are in support? Sorry. I have heard one reservation. I have not heard any objection. Let us put it to the vote. Okay, I'll put the question to you. Those who are in favor of submitting this establishment proposal to the ESC, hands up. 1, 2, 3. Those who object. 2, 3. Those who are in abstention. 1, 2, 3. Great. We have a 3-3-3 result. I do not need to register my stance. I'm the chairman. Okay, Secretary, you can see very clearly the views of members. I will tell members here that we cannot block the submission of the proposal to the ESC. But when you write papers, you should not say that the panel supports the proposal. At least you should supply additional information whether you are going to the ESC or the FC. Okay, that's it for the item. Next, we have invited deputations. Sorry. Next one, visit to Europe on thermal waste treatment facilities. I hope this won't take long. That's paper. CB bracket 1, 500, stroke 13 to 14, bracket 05, and also paper bracket 1, 539, stroke 13 to 14, bracket 01. The Secretary, would you like to walk us through the paper, please? Yes, Chairman. The 10-year blueprint has been issued. One of the main proposals is to reduce over-reliance on landfills and also to make the best use of waste-to-energy technologies. The mainstream public view is that we should make better use of waste-to-energy technology to reduce the burden on landfills. So we plan to go to Europe to look at their thermal waste treatment facilities so we can learn from their experience. To complement what I said, we propose that between the 3rd and July-March 2014, we would go to the UK, Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden in Europe because these places have rich experience in making use of thermal waste treatment facilities. We are going to look at 3 things: the moving grade incineration technology. This is a mainstream mature technology. And then there are emerging ones: plasma gasification technology and also gasification and pyrolysis technologies. We hope that by conducting the visit, we can increase our knowledge in the following 3 areas. First, the development of mainstream incineration technology in Europe, the reliability, emission control, environment impact, and public acceptance of the technology. Secondly, latest development and experience of alternative MSW treatment technology and the potential of application in Hong Kong in future. Number 3, waste management infrastructure experience and plans of the host countries. We hope that the relevant information could benefit our planning for waste management in Hong Kong beyond 2022. Members are invited to note the admin's planned visit and consider whether the panel is interested in conducting a similar visit. Thank you, Secretary. The clerk has looked at the schedule. In fact, if you also include traveling time, it should be from the 2nd to the 8th of March, 6 days. The 3rd to the 7th are for the actual visit. So, members, do you want to have such a trip? Secondly, do you accept the participation of non-members? Last time when we went to South Korea, many members from different parties and affiliations wanted to go. Number 3, money. The clerk has helped us check, and the air tickets to these countries are such that if we go for economy class, you will be able to support it by way of your allowance for the year. And in economy class ticket will cost 40,000. The one in the business class will be 86,000. If you want an upgrade, you have to pay out of your own pocket. So the basic question is, do you want to go on this trip? Mr. Yik Chi Ming, I'd like to ask the secretary. I can see the terminology. These are very new to me. Chairman, you have been to similar places, but is it that to the council these are new technologies? That's number one. And we only have $50,000 every session. I have been on long trips. Being in the economy class is so taxing. And if we want to have a business seat, we have to pay out of our own pocket. Is that right? Yes, even if you have an A1 post or position, that's going to be out of your own pocket. Secretary, please be brief. We are going to look at 3 technologies. A is a mainstream technology. This is also used in Macau, Taiwan, and South Korea. B and C have a certain history, but they have been newly used, let's say. When Hong Kong is pondering over this issue, it is suitable that we should look at all 3 technologies so that we can come to a judgment for the next 10 years and beyond. In the UK, we are going to talk to the minister and staff of the Environment Bureau so that we will know how to draw up our policy. We will look at the operation and also talk to their officials for an analysis so we can more accurately reduce our reliance on landfills. Mr. Christopher Chung. Those 3 technologies, the first one moving great incineration technology, we're going to go to a few places to look at it. You will have to take an aeroplane and you will have to board and alight and etc. That will take a lot of time. Can you do something about the itinerary so we spend the same number of days but we go for the more advanced technologies? Or are these 3 the state-of-the-art technology? Because I don't want to spend too much time on traveling. It's very tiring and also expensive. Secretary, Chairman, let me explain. The first country is the UK. You can see all the 3 technologies in the UK. And then we go to the Netherlands. This is across the strait. The Netherlands has a very good experience because the technology is quite mature. And then in Denmark, they have new incinerators. Some are being built. And we can see 2 things in Denmark. And that is how they go about designing the new facility. In fact, they have achieved some breakthrough in that they combine the new facility with community facilities. And then from Denmark to Sweden, we don't need to take a plane. From Copenhagen, you have the Cross Harbor Bridge to go to Sweden. In other words, you only have 2 transit flights in between. Why do we want to go to the Netherlands? From UK, we can go to Denmark and we can see everything already. Secretary, why are we going to the Netherlands? This is because amongst the countries, the Netherlands has the longest history in using incineration. Their policy is very mature. I think this will allow us to see the entire picture. We can see how different countries considered their policy. I believe the Netherlands is very useful. But you are not going to talk to anybody. You're just going to the plant. I think that can be taken care of by documentation, so you don't need to spend the time and money. Secretary, members, certainly we can consider that view, but the original itinerary can be completed within the scheduled time. Yes, that necessitates another transit flight. But since we are there already, if we can have a complete picture of what different countries are doing, and they have formulated their policies in a different way, so it will give us a more comprehensive understanding. Well, I think you can sleep on the plane if you fly at night. Well, you don't. Those transit flights are not as long as 8 hours. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, please be brief. Yes, you are going to have a few visits to these places. I'd like to know whether you have considered making use of the same technologies. Is it that basically they can be implemented in Hong Kong? In other words, there is the possibility of adopting such technologies in Hong Kong, because I know that when different countries use these technologies, there may be some location-specific factors. They may have a different history and policies. We may go and see these technologies and say they are good, but if we don't have the complementing policies in Hong Kong, are you saying we can adopt these in Hong Kong? Because you can go and see whatever good things in the world there is, but maybe they are not implementable in Hong Kong. Secretary, I think my colleague can add, but our thinking this time is, in the next 10 years, we need to use certain technologies, and I think members in the community would have to understand those and discuss those. And beyond 2022, we need to know whether we should have a bigger proportion of waste to energy. Let us cast a wider horizon. Let us try to see what technology we need right now, and then what other technologies can be adopted 10 years and beyond. Let me defer to my colleague. Certainly. Chairman, we have been exploring into these technologies. In 2009, we did a technology review. We also consulted the ACE. We analyzed these different technologies, including moving grade, plasma gasification, and also gasification and pyrolysis. Usually, to tackle municipal solid waste, we know that people use moving grade incineration. This is the mainstream technology, so it will be our first choice. But in the last 2 years, we have reviewed world trends, and different groups in the community have proposed gasification, including plasma gasification. I think we should look into these technologies. And we did another review this year, and the world trend remains the same. Other technologies have limitations. Some are for industrial use, some are of a smaller scale, and it may not be feasible for those to be adopted for MSW. But I think we should go and take a look. Especially in the UK, we are going to see 2 plants, one Swindon and the other one Avonmouth. It can take care of about 700 tons per day, and Swindon even a bigger volume. As the Secretary said, we have an open mind towards these technologies, but this will be an opportunity for ourselves and also members to take a look at the actual situation.
Dr. Philip Rowe. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, after the visit, for our panel, will there be a preliminary evaluation? That is, after inspecting these 3 technologies on their energy consumption, effectiveness, costs, and land required, will there be a very simple table to analyze the pros and cons of these technologies? Otherwise, it won't mean much. Now, about the program, we start with UK and we end with Denmark. Is that the most effective itinerary? I may ask the Secretariat or the administration whether this is the most effective way, so that we can see or visit more places with such a short time. In fact, so long, these the questions you ask can be prepared by ourselves in advance, so, for the host to answer our questions as to whether the information is very comprehensive. I think that's up to us. Of course, we don't just go there to pay visits. We ask questions, and every time after duty visits, we need to compile reports. So that's up to how or the depth of our participation. Secretary. The preliminary itinerary is very cost effective, having considered flight time and the facilities to be visited and the exchange sessions with authorities. This is the most effective approach, and we have, based on the recommendation of our colleagues, compiled this program. Now, after you arrive in UK, I see that there will be some transportation needed within UK, going to Avonmouth and Swindon. Anything to look at in London? Well, in London West, we're going to check out the lakeside waste from energy facility. That's quite near to the city centre. So the first three items are within UK, because there might be traffic congestion and it takes 3 hours to travel from the city centre to the suburb, and it will be quite tiring for members. Now, Madam Chair, I think the question is not about having too many on our tour, but too few. Yes, that's my concern as well. There could be as few as 2. For Avonmouth and Swindon, I think that technology used are different. Whereas for moving grade, I see that in the following 4 places, they adopt the same technology. So, since they're the same, is it possible to reduce them, the number of places to visit, so that there won't be duplication? Madam Chair, let me supplement. We're going to visit 4 places using moving grade technology because they have different experiences. For Lakeside in UK, it's quite new, and it has been awarded a design award. So the design is innovative. For Netherlands, it's large-scale facility with capacity of 4,400 tons. So first of all, is much larger than the 3,000 tons as recommended here, and it's also one of the one of the facilities with highest efficiency. It has a very comprehensive waste collection and waste management policy as well. So it's not just about the facilities. For the remaining 2, the design for Roskilde in 2012, it won a very famous design award, and it's quite a popular tourist spot because that design can be incorporated or can integrate into the community. So apart from Roskilde, there is also the other facility in Denmark, and different technology were considered for this plant. And in fact, this is a still ongoing project. They're still considering what technology to be used for the new plant, and in the end they have decided to use moving grade. And they have different considerations on this technology. So if our site is in Chekuchao, it's unlikely that it will be promoted as a tourist spot. So can we do away with item number 6? Secretary. Well, in fact, some say that Chekuchao in Hong Kong is also an important landmark for sea transport. So in the design, we should consider the aesthetic visual aspect. Now, let me supplement. We look at the moving grade technology in UK, the Netherlands, and Denmark because, as said by my colleague, in UK there are 3 different types of technology deployed, and we will exchange with the UK government on why these 3 technologies are used. For the Netherlands, it's the plant is very large in scale, and in Denmark, the latest idea is how such facilities can be integrated in the community, and we have one that has been commissioned already, and one that is yet to be commissioned. So on 3 different levels, they serve as reference for us. So 3 questions for members. Number 1, anyone going? If there are only 2 members, we may not be too representative. And secondly, will we allow non-members of this panel to join? I think it's easier. And point number 3, budget. I think it's easier to resolve. So the key question is whether we need this duty visit or not. If we do need it, then please raise your hand, and before you raise your hand, you should ask yourself whether you will go or not. Mr. Yichiming, I'd like to hear from other members first. I have never participated in such duty visits. I'd like to hear from members whether it's worth going. Now, I have not visited facilities such as gasification and plasma gasification and pyrolysis. For moving grade, during the last term in South Korea and Guangzhou, during these duty visits, we did visit moving grade technology plant. And apart from looking at the hardware, what benefited us was the exchange with the plant operator and government officials. We're not technocrats. We don't really know in great detail what the hardware is about. But during the past 2 visits, I was able to learn about the statistics for plasma gasification technology and gasification and pyrolysis technologies. Recently, some green groups have been advocating the use of these technologies. However, only one decision has been made to use one kind of technology, and I don't think in the coming decade another decision will be made. And once this decision is made, it's unlikely that another one will be made in 10 years. So I think we should consider which technology to be used. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Alright, so it will be built in Chekuchao, and I don't know whether I understand you correctly, Madam Chair. You mean to say that after the plant is built in Chekuchao, it won't be in the near future that we need to consider another plant with another technologies. That is why we need to understand the technology. And if we understand the technology, it will help us and whether we support the new waste treatment facilities or not. So we need to understand these technologies. I do have some reservations on this. I need to draw a line here, whether or not we have a conclusion today. 2 members have raised their hands. Some adaptations will be coming in. This item will end at 10. If you can't reach a decision today, then we can discuss after the meeting. Mr. Lee Chak-yan and Mr. Albert Chen, 1 minute each, and then a brief response by the Secretary. I can't say whether I'm going or not for the Netherlands. Now, I heard that you need the waste management policies. So you need to look at the whole system, not just the plant itself. Technology is just part of the issue. So if we're going to the Netherlands, we need to look at the whole system. Thank you. Mr. Albert Chen. Madam Chair, you cannot hypothesize that definitely the government will win in the JR case of Chekuchao. After the visit, we may oppose the Chekuchao plan. We need to look at the state-of-the-art technology. But I think things will be quite busy around March. I'm worried whether we can actually form a delegation for the duty visit. Secretary, early March, I understand that it seems there would be a break for electrical and for the Netherlands. Whether we can visit more places, I think we need to consider the time. And Chekuchao, I understand there is an appeal case going on, and according to our blueprint, in the coming 10 years, we will be commencing this waste-to-energy facility, and some 20% of the waste is still dealt with at landfills. So we're mobilizing the community to consider how we can reduce the use of landfills, and we need therefore the use of new technologies and new locations to tackle the problem. So this duty visit is in response to the Chekuchao project. In addition, it's also for the long-term waste management policy in Hong Kong. So in responding to Mr. Wu Chiwai's question, we look at things further ahead.
Let me propose that since we are not going to make a decision today anyway, I'll ask the clerk to issue a questionnaire to you. First of all, whether you agree to go, and secondly, most importantly, whether you are going. So let's see whether we can form a group. And if we register interest to go, then we can discuss the itinerary with the Secretary to see whether we can do away with certain trips, etc., and whether we want to look at recycling policies as well. The Bureau is proposing March because they will be seeking funding support for the incinerator, and the Secretary would like to go before the proposal is vetted, but sometimes things don't happen as we want them. So we will issue that questionnaire to seek your views first. That's it for the item. Mr. James Toh. I may not be able to go. Please be brief because we have overrun. I don't know about other members, but if 4 or 5 of us are going, then I think we should allow them to go. That's it. But first of all, we have to discuss whether we want to go or not. Well, that's what I mean. If there are just 2, then no. But if there are 4, like 4 who are going, then I think the panel should agree. So I will actually propose this to happen. Okay, we'll ask our members first. And you can go back and ask your party colleagues to see who are going. No, what I mean is we make the resolution here so you make the arrangement easier. No, I dare not. I dare not make that decision on behalf of you. No, I mean if there are 4 who would tick yes, then let us say we are going. This is what I mean. Do you agree we do this? In other words, we set a threshold for this panel. At least 4 are going. Mr. Wang Tingkwang and Mr. To, I have a question for you. 4 panel members, you mean, yes? Or 4 out of the entire council? No, just the panel, 4 members. I basically agree. 3 or 4, I would say. If it is just this panel. Are you going? Don't ask individual members. I have not looked at my diary. I don't know. The clerk has told me that usually 3 can form a group and apply to the House Committee. Miss Elizabeth Quat, 3 is acceptable to me. Okay, then we'll issue the questionnaire to panel members. All right, that's it for this item. Next, we'll have to start the next one right away, and we'll ask the deputations to come in. The next item is to receive public views on issues raised for public engagement with regard to the municipal solid waste charging scheme. The Secretary and the Chairman have to take a short break of 3 minutes. Sorry, deputations. We started at 8:30, so we needed to take a short break. We'll wait for the clerk to come back in, and then we can start. But now I can tell you the rules for making your views known today. In front of you, you have a microphone, which is very sensitive. You don't really have to speak right into it. and you also have an earpiece. If you turn to channel 0, it's the floor. Channel 1 is Cantonese. You will have simultaneous interpretation, and channel 2 is also interpretation into English. You have 3 minutes each. I remind you that what you are saying today will not be covered and protected by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. If you have a paper or a submission which have not been given to the Secretariat, please do give us a copy after the meeting.
Would like to introduce to you all the amenities and equipments on your booth. We have a very sensitive microphone so that you could be well heard, and you do not need to speak right into it. And there is an earpiece at every booth. When you turn to the channel 0, it will be the floor sound, and the channel 1 is for the simultaneous interpretation in Cantonese, and channel 2 would be simultaneous interpretation in English. And please be reminded that your statement would not be under the protection of the Power and Privilege Ordinance. And just in case, if you have any written statement, please submit to the Secretariat after the meeting. Thank you. 咁我哋就開始請第一。
The first deputation to speak, we have World Green Organization, Mr. Angus Wong, Policy Advocacy Manager. 3 minutes for you. Thank you, Chairman. The World Green Organization supports waste charging, and I'm happy to tell you that actually the community supports it as well. In September, we asked the Polytechnic University to interview 1,000 citizens, and half of them supported the policy, so there is public support for the policy. We have seen that the policy is supported, that people like to have it household by volume, and we have asked the public which mode they would support. They would say 65% would support household by volume, and those who support the other two modes only number about 10%. In other words, most of them supported the household by volume mode, and we asked the public to evaluate the 3 different charging schemes, and 65% said that it is most fair to charge each household by volume. And those who think that the other 2 modes are also fair, they only constitute about 25%. In other words, the public think that the household by volume scheme is most fair. We also asked the public to talk about waste reduction vis-a-vis the 3 modes, because actually the charging scheme is really for the reduction of waste, and 64% of people thought that household by volume will be fair as well as effective in reducing waste, and 35 to 36% think the other 2 modes are effective. This shows that the public support the charging scheme, and they support it if it is household by volume. If you go for other modes, you will have to exercise caution that the public will think that it is unfair and it is not effective in reducing waste, and the public may not support it in the end. We hope the administration will pay attention to that point. And also, we have done some cross-analyses to look at the demographics. Of course, these are figures which are important in statistics. If the household income is $20,000, people tend to support it, but those who have a household income lower than that figure, they tend not to support it so much. Those who live in subsidized housing and private housing, they more or less support, but those who are in public housing estates, only 45% support them, and also those who are university educated would give this more support. And the age bracket, young people tend to support the charging scheme. 56% of those aged 18 to 34 would support. So the proposal is that from now on you should go to public housing estates to do more publicity, so you can implement the scheme more smoothly. Thank you. Hong Kong Recycled Materials and Reproduction Business General Association Limited, Dr. Jackie Lau, the President. Thank you, Chairman. Our association supports the charging scheme. Just now, Mr. Wong has made many points. We also support the household by volume scheme. We think that will be the way to promote recycling. This will provide an incentive for the public to make their own efforts to support recycling. And also, at the same time, we hope the administration will show resolve in providing recycling facilities. The association thinks that this is an opportunity for business. If we have a good recycling system, then we should not just look at plastics, metals, and paper. We can recycle other materials, including wooden material and glass bottles. We hope that once you have this MSW charging scheme, you will have the resources to help other sectors of the recycling industry, which is in a way declining. My father was in the same business, but now we are throwing more recyclables into landfills. I saw that you are going to learn from overseas countries. In fact, we can do the same. We have limited space, but we have a heavily built up area. And in terms of waste management, we might not have to make use of so many vehicles and so many trips because we live very closely together. We enjoy an advantage in that sense. I hope the administration will also mandate the use of green materials and also green facilities within new housing developments. Don't allow developers to maximize the plot ratio in putting up residential blocks. I hope the Secretary can do this and to mandate space in any building for waste management. Sometimes we, the recycling industry, operates with a lot of difficulty because when we go and collect recyclables in office buildings in the central district, we have to start at about 6 a.m. because we have restricted areas in all the roads once the peak hours start. And we support the household by volume scheme because the environment is not just about one person's effort or the administration's effort. We need everybody to chip in. Thank you. Greeners Action, Ms. Kwok Ying Ying, Senior Project Officer. Thank you. Greeners Action support the charging by volume scheme. The charging scheme must comply with two principles: one, reduction of waste, and two, fairness. The Secretary and also the consultation paper do say that the objective of the charge is to reduce waste and to reshape people's habits. So the best way to do it is to do it by household by volume. That would provide the biggest incentive to reduce waste. And this will achieve the principle of the polluter paying, and there is a fairness. However, if you go by building by volume, we will be worried that households will have to apportion the cost among themselves, and in the end, there is no incentive for anyone to reduce waste.
And it's also against the principle of fairness. And in today's news, the Greeners Action, together with Friends of the Earth, have implemented projects on a voluntary project involving a building, and we give them specific plastic bags for carrying waste, which is to be put outside their doors at a particular time at a particular location. And beforehand, we have fully communicated with them, and over 90% of the households took part in the scheme, and waste reduced by 15%. There were non-compliant cases sporadically, but we think that it's a voluntary program, and we feel encouraged with such a rate of reduction, and we do have confidence. We don't have a perfect charging mechanism, but in the future there will be breaches we mustn't imagine that because of these bridges the whole mechanism will fail. We should take the first step. Otherwise, we'll be wasting another 10 years, 20 years. We can improve the details, for example, before the implementation of the charging scheme in 2016. There is time for us to improve the support for the recycling industry and upgrade our facilities. On enforcement, we can have something like a tobacco control office, for example, a waste reduction control office, etc. And random inspections can be conducted for people to change their behavior gradually. Next, Dr. Johnny Chan, Chairman of the Hong Kong Association of Property Management Companies. Now, the members of our associations, our PMCs, we agree with the principle of polluter pays. At the same time, we think that in the long run, in order to resolve the problem of waste, we need to reduce waste at source. Implementing the MSW charging mechanism, in principle, our association supports the mechanism. However, there must be fairness, and the polluter pays principle should be complied with. And the Association of Property Management Companies have members which are PMCs, and the fees come from management fees from households. So after the MSW charging mechanism is introduced, the procedure should be streamlined as much as possible so as to reduce costs, so as to reduce the pressure on PMCs to increase management fees. MSW charging is an effective method. However, it must not give an impression to the public that it's double charging on top of government rates. And we should also encourage members of the public to take part in waste recycling. If it's done by way of household by volume, our concern is that some non-compliant households might discard their rubbish within the building anywhere. So we may have to upgrade the security systems or enhance the monitoring, and this might induce increase or pressure in increasing fees. Now, sometimes within new buildings there are vacant premises, so charging by building by volume may not be a fair approach to realize the principle of polluter pays. If direct financial incentive can be given to encourage waste reduction, this will be better. Otherwise, if it's charged by building, it might be unfair to some households. So the government perhaps could consider lowering the fees if it's done by building by volume, and if the in a proportionate manner. I'm Chiu-Man Leung from DB. We support the consultation exercise or invitation for response on waste reduction by waste charging. Our view is as follows. The DAB conducted a telephone poll earlier on waste charging, and there were more respondents for waste charging than against. And in the community, the same views were heard. However, our people would like to have a transparent, fair, and open waste charging mechanism that is by volume mechanism with the use of bags. And initially, when bags are purchased, to be purchased, some bags can be given away for free, so that people get used to this method before they're required to buy bags by themselves. According to the consultation document, 90% of the buildings have PMCs at present. This doesn't mean that things can be resolved by PMCs charging a fee. For public housing estates, for tenement buildings, old buildings, and rural areas which do not have PMCs, these will face problems when we have waste charging, and inevitably we may see problems like littering in the street or within the building. I hope the government will not dodge the problem by just charging by building. The government should also step up its effort in tackling littering. We think that this waste charging mechanism can be introduced in C&I sector, where waste are types of waste are less diversified and more concentrated, and then the results can be analyzed. This can also help people get into the habit. The most important thing is waste charging is just a means. The government should adopt a comprehensive waste management strategy in order to achieve results. Next, Mr. Louis Chan, committee member of the Hong Kong Green Strategy Alliance. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our alliance supports waste charging. We believe that in a commercialized city like Hong Kong, imposing charging mechanisms can effectively help people's behavior change. And we are getting wider acceptance on polluter pays principle, so it is the right time to introduce waste charging. On the four major issues in this exercise, we have the following views. On charging, whether only domestic waste should be charged or commercial waste should be charged as well. On the fairness principle, under the existing circumstances, we think that charges should be imposed on all sectors, on all types of waste, and it's part of the waste management strategy. On charging mechanism, we think that for C&I sector, it should be done by way of charging by weight. For household, since they do not have instruments to measure weight, it will be more difficult, whereas for C&I sector, it's easier. And we also have a trip ticket system. This can be considered. On household waste, we think it should be done by volume, be it by building, by household, or what. It can be done by using dedicated plastic bags. And on rubbish bins in the street, I think they should be phased out or at least reduced. Something should be done with FHD, and waste collection and recycling can be done in the community by NGOs. On the level of fees, this is a decision to be made by the administration together with the community. It should basically be cost recovery. For the underprivileged, we should look after them. There should be rebates or concessions. And lastly, for the sector or recycling industry, this morning we talked about the recycling fund. The important thing is the administration should not just engage the NGOs. Since they're non-profit making, it will be difficult for them alone to promote the policies. Next, Mr. Simon Zhang, Vice President of the Hong Kong Environmental Industry Association. Our association supports waste charging. Now, some members, in order to canvass votes, oppose the extension of landfills and the construction of incinerators, causing the waste management cost to go up. We support tackling waste at source and waste charging for C&I sector. As far as this is concerned, we recommend that it be done by weight. We don't agree that the C&I sector should go first. We hope that there will be comprehensive policies to support it. As for household waste, we suggest that household waste should be charged by volume, and we can draw reference from Taiwan, since waste charging in Taiwan has been implemented for more than 10 years, and it has successfully reduced the household waste by 60%. As for grassroots level, the administration should support subsidizing them in buying plastic bags, and for older buildings there are tenants as well as owners, so it should be fair in order to reduce fly tipping. Finally, we suggest that there should be education effort by the administration, and award schemes can be set up using a carrot and stick approach, and for successful examples to share their experience. A Taiwanese professor gave his experience a few weeks ago. In the past, for hikers in Taiwan, they did not need to use GPS. They just need to follow the trail of litter, which will lead them all the way down the hill. After waste charging that has been implemented for 10 years or so, this trail disappeared. So we support waste charging. Next, Mr. Daniel Cheung, Deputy Chairman of the Federation of Hong Kong Industries. Thank you, Madam Chair. On the issue of MSW, the FHKI supports implementing waste charging on all sectors of the community to alleviate the pressure on landfills. As mentioned by other deputations, we agree that for C&I waste it should be done by waste, whereas for private estates, domestic waste should be charged by household by volume. The example in Taiwan is very successful. We can just follow suit. We don't need to come up with another approach. Apart from waste charging, we should also do more to support and promote the recycling industry. We hope to reuse the recyclables to support the development of the recycling industries. Polluter pays principle is a good approach. If there is a price on waste, we won't see waste at all. The aluminum cans won't be discarded in the street. So if we impose a fee on these recyclables, it will help the industry in doing more. And we see examples everywhere.
And talking about a recycling fund, I hope the fees charged will be for the support of the recycling industry, not just in terms of production, but all the way from transportation to the final processes. Now, the merchants, businessmen have to depend on themselves. And also, there must be a licensing scheme. Don't allow just anyone to be a recycler because you want to monitor them and you want them to abide by certain rules. And also, in terms of the final stage, we support the waste-to-energy scheme. So we can produce energy by collecting waste. I mentioned in the energy subgroup that the incinerator is now a great controversy, but in terms of power generation by the two power companies, we are also facing the fuel mix issue. Can we not combine the two? Later on, if waste is incinerated, then we can use that for power generation, so we can solve two problems with one solution. Next, Tin Shui Wai Community Development Alliance, Mr. Kong Kin Singh. Thank you, Chairman. Talking about MSW charging, this is a big step in helping the environment. But I think we should also look at some related issues. We have been talking about recycling, producers' responsibility, etc. But we have not been talking too much about food recycling. Today, I'd like to concentrate on this. We are producing waste. In terms of MSW, it will be 8,000 to 9,000 tons. And according to the EPD, 44% are perishables. I thank the Friends of the Earth who said that in May last year, supermarkets are abandoning 87 tons of products every day, and 29 tons of those have not reached their expiry date, and such food can still be consumed. Now, such food is dumped as waste. Is it that supermarkets just have to pay a gate fee so they can dump such perishables? And do you have policies to tackle such food items which have not expired? The Secretary for Food for Labor and Welfare is looking to develop the food bank. But what we are seeing now is quite ironic. On the one hand, Welcome and ParknShop are dumping food which is still good for consumption, and on the other hand, the administration is encouraging low-income families to get food from the food bank. If supermarkets are dumping edible food, why is it that on the other hand we have to make available money to buy food for the poor? According to figures, in July 2008, we have spent $51 million to buy food for low-income families, while other people are dumping food into the landfill. So what is happening, Secretary? We actually propose, actually we are happy that you have this steering committee set up to promote recycling, but you have not included a food recycling program. The U.S. National Environment Protection Bureau has mapped out a food recycling ladder. Any food that still is edible should be given to the poor, and only at the very end should they be landfilled. In 1996, the U.S. passed a law called the Good Samaritan Food Donation Law. Should we not also recycle edible food, so you reduce waste and also you act in a moral manner? Okay, thank you. When you hear the bell, please just complete the sentence and allow the next speaker to start, or else it will be unfair to other speakers. Mr. Wu Chunying from a concerned group. Thank you. We have heard many deputations, and I'm very glad that the administration is starting to reduce waste at source. Now, I have heard about landfills, high-tech incinerators, etc. I think you are putting the cart before the horse when you say this. This should only be the last straw. Fee charging should not be the final stop. That is not going to tackle our wasting of resources. We should actually go for reduction of waste at source. Is it that we have not done proper public education, so people are not doing it? In Taiwan, it's very successful because they have high public awareness. However, with this fee charging scheme passed, maybe in Hong Kong we still do not have separation of waste at source. Some kaifongs or residents are saying if there is a fee charging scheme, maybe we should take our waste to a faraway place and just dump it elsewhere. So you please think about this. We know that there is a steering committee on recycling. That is something good. Half a year ago, the news had it that in Hong Kong, you have been saying we have the 3 color bins for the recycling of paper, metal, and plastic. But in fact, the contractor will collect the waste in their bins and dump it in landfills. The FEHD has said that they would respect the spirit of the contract, so they do nothing about this. Secretary, since you know this is happening, you should do something at the steering committee. The public may not know it. They are working hard to separate waste, but the contractor will just dump it into landfills. Now, Mr. Lowe's company has got $530,000 to act as a contractor to collect waste from the bins, but where does the waste go? I hope the government will look into it. Lastly, how can we enhance the quality of our residents? I hope members and also ourselves should reflect on the situation. Or else, we'll just be talking about moving our own waste or refuse to someone else's doorstep. My community work tells me that many residents still think that they can take the waste to the mainland for disposal. Next, Mr. Wong Yu-hon. Thank you. We believe a quantity-based charging scheme is the way to go, and I think the by household, by volume way is more fair. But we should start to reduce waste at source. We see the 3 color bins, and we see bins collecting used clothes. But we are not attending to other products. In the business sector, if they can manage it, if they have spare money, they do recycling. So a lot of recyclables are still in our landfills. The administration or the public is spending money on dealing with such waste. Maybe we can subsidize NGOs or even businesses who can help to promote recycling. Now let us look at actual implementation. Quantity-based charging. Okay, people have to pay for waste management. But actually, our government tax, property tax, for example, may include an element of waste management. Why don't we make use of that instead of asking people to pay again? In old tenement buildings, they may not have a management company, so who is going to pay the fees? And the public may think it is not fair, because if you live in a housing estate, there will be people collecting waste, so you pay. But in tenement buildings, nobody collects the waste, so do they have to pay? So perhaps I think you should look at how you can use part of the land tax, etc., to tackle waste management. And also, I would propose that at the beginning there should be a pilot scheme, so you can calculate the volume produced at different places by different stakeholders, and in estates, residents could be given dedicated plastic bags so they get used to how the system implements. And then we can have a kind of deductible if you do not exceed a certain volume. This will benefit grassroots. As you can see, the grassroots are crying out loud in objection to the charging scheme. Last but not least, we are concerned about fly tipping. Can we do something like in South Korea? If you are a whistleblower, you will be rewarded, say, if you find that people do not actually separate waste. Next, Mr. Philip Wu from Federation of Hong Kong Property Management Industry Limited. We support the charging scheme, but we are concerned about implementation. There are people saying that if a building does not have an OC or a management company, could they be exempted? Now, I hope the administration will consider not doing this, because that will constitute an incentive for people not to set up an OC or engage a PMC. As to people using non-designated bags, dumping refuse in common parts in the building, would that contravene an offense, the law, or would it just be for the OC to tackle the situation? So who should be taking up the responsibility of handling this? Should it be the OC or the PMC, or should someone report to the police? Some PMCs are designated by the developers, but PMCs usually do not have a lot of power. If we can have video taping, if we can have CCTV, then when the responsibilities are not delineated clearly, there may be conflicts between residents, owners, OCs, and PMCs. And I think you should also conduct courses for OCs so they can have heightened awareness. Of course, there are many OCs who said, Chairman, that if there is a subsidy, there would be more incentive for them to attend these courses. And at the same time, you should promote community recycling. You should liaise more with OCs to teach them how to do recycling and separation of waste. You should also delineate the duties for PMCs. If you want the property management industry to assist you, it doesn't matter, it's all right. But if OCs do not understand, they do not want to cooperate with us, then how can PMCs be held responsible? Is that fair? Right now, there are no responsibilities placed on our shoulders, but honorable members, you have no member representing the property management industry, but I hope legislators will also care about our interests. Please do not dump everything on our shoulders. Next, Tin Shui Wai Concern Group, Ms. Chang Hong. I am Chang Hong from Tin Shui Wai. We women do not object to the charging scheme. We believe, however, it may have an impact on us, housewives. Before fees are charged, the administration should make facilities for recycling. You should do good publicity and explain things to housewives, so you help us reduce waste. Sometimes producers should also take up the responsibility, just like this bottle of cooking oil. For example, we use 2 bottles a month, but so we have no choice but to buy cooking oil in glass bottles. So the producers should also take up some responsibility about glass bottles.
商家嘅責任幾大嘅，我覺得政府應該。
So I think the administration should make publicity effort properly for second-hand furniture. For example, this can be donated to the needy as an environmental protection initiative. And citizens should be encouraged to protect the environment. For example, I don't throw away much rubbish, and I shouldn't be required to pay much. And also recycling or reusing second-hand furniture and electrical appliances. This is also important, or they will go to the landfill. If these are collected and given to the needy, this is important. I think the administration should do more than providing tricolor bins. The administration should encourage recycling second-hand items, and more support should be given to the recycling industry so that the recyclables don't just go to landfills. Food waste is an example. I think much of the waste come from food waste. Next, Mr. Fan Hei Tai. Well, from the experience, I think we can divide waste into raw waste, domestic waste, and C&I waste. And we think that the waste charging can be implemented in phases, starting with the C&I sector first. And the C&I sector should understand the situation. In the end, once the policy is mature, it will be extended to all sectors. And in the consultation paper on waste charging, little has been mentioned about recycling. And there are households that support recycling. They separate different types of waste, including food waste. And if they similarly are subject to waste charging, they may feel deflated. And Christmas trees can be recycled. And we should consider how we can divide the Christmas trees or large items into chunks, and if it's charged by volume instead of weight, then a Christmas tree may weigh 70 or 80 pounds. It may be unfair to others, and no matter which approach to be taken, there will be opposition. The Hong Kong Environmental Protection Association hopes the administration would show some determination. Next deputation, Ms. Hilary Chang. I think the administration should think from citizens' perspective. Our concern is how it can be implemented to reduce waste. Supporting measures are needed. Without supporting measures, the administration should not introduce waste charging, or we will be affected. I live in the PRH in Tuen Mun. There is no recycle bin at all among the 4 blocks. There is only a small bin in a shopping mall managed by Lingreed, and my block is the farthest away. It is very difficult to separate different kinds of waste. I need to use a handcart and travel a distance in order to recycle waste paper. We really face many difficulties when we separate waste. Even if I carry the separated waste to the small bin in the shopping mall, it's of no use, because I see all sorts of waste in the recycle bin, just like an ordinary rubbish bin. And I saw cigarette butts and other kinds of waste, even babies' diapers. It's not truly a bin for recycling. Even for waste already separated in the recycle bin, because of the contamination, they cannot be recycled. I asked some friends who have given up separating waste because of this, because the waste separated would finally go to the landfill. It's pointless to separate waste at source. Also, because of the lack of market or lack of value, these waste go to landfills in the end. And my friends, and including myself, don't really know how waste should be separated. We don't know, and we aren't really sure whether certain material can be recycled. For example, there are over a dozen types of plastics. We don't know which are recyclables, which are not. And packaging materials for items also give us a headache, because we don't know whether the packaging materials, in fact paper or plastic, we don't know whether they can be recycled. And there is still lack of awareness among public in recycling waste. So for the rosy picture of reducing waste in future, I still don't feel encouraged. 想來驗天水圍 Community Development Network next. As a food recycling organization, we have great concern. Waste of food is very serious in Hong Kong. We have organizations like ourselves going to every estate to collect food waste. But when we look at the statistics, well, CNI food waste is still on the rise. Despite the increasing number of organizations, things are still at stake, and the landfill will soon be filled up. We believe that when charging mechanism is introduced, something must be done on the producer side, or else the rich will continue to dump the waste at landfill. The bundled sales approach, like giveaways, etc., in the end, the consumers might just discard the extra materials, and in the end, the landfill will just reach its capacity. Organizations may help in collecting food waste, and yet every day thousands of tons of food waste are being dumped, so we can't collect them all. We always say that the producers should be responsible. The government officials should also be responsible. This is all empty talk. If we don't have specific measures or legislation, nothing can be done. In US, there is a very clear path. Waste should be tackled at source, and if there is leftover food, they should be given to those in need or to dogs. And if there are such clear sets of guidelines, we can reduce waste. We can have carrots and stick approach. We can give incentives for those who save. Only by doing so can we tackle the abundant waste produced in the CNI sector. More bins or more recycled bins should be provided in housing estates, so that recycling can be done within the community or on spot, instead of having several large organic waste treatment facilities, because this will only increase carbon footprint by transporting waste. Next, Hong Kong Professionals and Senior Executive Association, Mr. Angus Wong. We support introducing charging mechanism. Waste reduction at source and waste charging are good solutions to managing waste in Hong Kong. We agree that dedicated bags or designated bags of two different sizes should be used in charging waste by volume, and there should be retail points across the territory for people to purchase designated bags. We think that it's difficult to implement the other approach. if it's done by weight, there could be operational difficulties which may be inconvenient for people. And if it's done through PMCs, management fees may need to go up. As for residential commercial buildings, the government is of the view that it should be done by weight, which is an established practice, and a reasonable rate should be charged. And we can accumulate experience and step up publicity and education. And awards and reliefs can be given. For those needy families, the government can provide subsidies or give away a small number of designated bags for free. For new buildings, sufficient space should be allocated for the installment of waste separation and recycling facilities. The government is promoting and supporting the recycling industry. Finally, our association thinks that there should be coordination between government departments. There should be a reporting mechanism and inspections, and to gradually reduce the number of rubbish bins and increase more facilities for public RCPs. And eventually the use of foam should be phased out. Next, Ms. Frances Young from Friends of the Earth. Thank you. Recently, we've conducted a survey. We commissioned the CEO of Hong Kong to conduct a poll, and 56% of the respondents are supportive of the charging mechanism. And they think the charging mechanism should be fair, and it can realize the polluter pays principle. The administration should not, for convenience, implement the charging by building. For those in favor of charging by volume, we see more and more of them. 67% of them supported a rise of 15% comparing to our last survey. For those against, it dropped substantially from 35% last year to 8% this year. So there is a mandate for this policy to be introduced. The greatest concern is whether it be difficult to implement charging by volume. And with the Greeners Action, we rolled out a pilot scheme on collecting waste by volume. We should translate it into action. In fact, we have been liaising closely with residents along with PMCs, and in the process there aren't many difficulties. For example, the residents may tell us that we need more designated bags of a certain size, etc. So when the public becomes aware of how the charging scheme is to be implemented, they will be confident in accepting it. Even if there are hiccups in the pilot scheme, it's alright, because we need to accumulate experience through the use of pilot schemes. And many deputations today suggest that apart from charging mechanism, we need to have supporting measures to reduce waste. And this is very true. The administration should listen to our views. We should not go ahead with the producer responsibility scheme before we introduce a charging scheme, and vice versa. Waste problem is very serious. Anything that can help reduce waste at source should be taken ahead immediately.
Next, Mr. Tan Chi Wang. From Hong Kong Waste Disposal Industry Association. Thank you. I think other deputations have said well. We represent over 300 refuse collection vehicles. We like to support the quantity-based charging scheme. However, we have to make things clear because we are talking about responsibility. Taiwan uses the rubbish bags. We think that's a good idea, but we should look closer at Taiwan. The plastic bag is used, but there is a weight issue as well. And in fact, the collection is done in such a way that the household waste is transferred to the collectors directly. And there are refuse transporters. So it's a very smooth process. If a certain bag is not of the right color, it will be removed at once. In other words, if there are more stakeholders, there are more issues to consider. To us, the administration must make things very clear. And the calculation method, the collection method, those must be made clear so there is no confusion. And as to the fee level, it should be set at a low level. It should be an incentive instead of a penalty. You should provide the incentive before people will change their habits. If the fee is set on a high level, the waste will be wandering around. What I mean is, if you look at the present fee charging for construction waste, it is collected by weight. It is about $125 a ton. In other words, less than 20 cents a kilo. If we are going to charge the public for MSW, and if the fee is higher than that we charge developers or contractors, that will be unfair. And we can take reference from medical waste and construction waste, which are already being charged at the moment. We can see that we do not have to go for one particular model, or else in 1994, remember, there was a strike by drivers taking refuse to landfills. We don't want to see that happen again. Next, Mr. Cliff Tang from New Century Forum. Good morning. We support a comprehensive charging scheme. We hope to remind the administration that community groups and residents and even political parties are in support of this fee charging scheme. Deputation's views are quite uniform, so you should really treasure this hard-won opportunity to show your determination, or instead of going for administrative exigencies and just go to private buildings first and then commercial and industrial buildings and then single buildings and then village houses. I don't want you to do it in phases. I expect you to do it right away. Show the resolve. You should, and please do not walk away from high administrative fees. Now, if you go for the easy way out, if you don't want to face the objection of certain sectors, I will be very disappointed with you. So first of all, show your determination. Second, the household by volume scheme. You should teach the public how to do waste management. You should not just seek to penalize them. Remember the levy on plastic shopping bags? People have used 90% less plastic bags at supermarkets. But that experience also tells us that now you don't collect the levy, and yet you are not subsidizing the recycling industry. In other words, supermarkets are taking the gain For what? For no particular results. So I hope when you charge for MSW, the money will go back into the recycling industry. We have talked about food waste, that you don't have places for composting, the transportation fee is high. Well, I think you need to intervene before we can do anything. Supposing you subsidize the collection of food waste by $2 a kilogram, I'm sure there would be many people going into the industry. So once you provide the incentive, people will come forward. So I learned from the experience of plastic shopping bags and put the money back into the recycling industry. Number 3, publicity and education. We have people coming into Hong Kong under the individual visit scheme. And as other deputations have said, you should step up enforcement in the streets. If you only rely on FEHD, you are not going to get the job done. Next, Mr. Peter Yu from the Civic Party. The Civic Party supports the rationale behind the fee charging scheme. We think there should be 4 principles to go by. 1, polluter pays. The people making the pollution should pay for cleaning the environment. 2, that the fees should be charged according to quantity. We should have a direct pegging of the fee to the quantity of refuse produced. Number 3, it should be a revenue neutral scheme in that you should not seek to make money for the treasury. And number 4, there should be appropriate assistance given. In other words, there should be incentives included in the scheme so as to motivate the public to reduce waste. As for the grassroots, the Civic Party is of the view that there should be a per capita refuse dumping level. In other words, if a certain person produces refuse lower than that level, he doesn't have to pay the fee. The Civic Party also asked the administration to put the fees charged back into green industries. In December 2012, you started to mention the producer responsibility scheme. I think that was in 2005. But then I don't think much has resulted from that document. The Civic Party is disappointed with you producing a consultation paper without making decisions. I expect the Bureau to step up efforts in launching this fee charging scheme. The administration should come up with a concrete timetable for launching the fee scheme. We expect you to do it as quickly as possible, and the relevant departments should complete the consultation by the second quarter of 2014 and show the community the results. Mr. Harold Ip from Secure Information Disposal Services Limited. We are a waste recycler and also we are an exporter. We face the waste producers. We can see that over half of the waste can actually be recycled. But we also do exporting, and we can see that the situation is quite treacherous in that if the price of waste fluctuates, people might not want the waste and all of it may go to landfills. We also rely heavily on mainland policies. When we have the Green Fence program, our plastic bottles have nowhere to go already. And on the other hand, I agree with the household by volume scheme, not just for fairness, but so that the waste producers will reduce waste at source. People object to the fee charging scheme because, first of all, they don't have the facilities. And secondly, talking about food waste and glass bottles, somehow they are done as charities and the transportation cost is extremely high. We hope by having the fee charging scheme, we can systematize the situation. And also, we can have investment for recycling of new materials. Like in Japan, diapers are recycled. But I asked Japan how they did it, and it's all because of the fee charging. They could survive, they could make a profit, all because of the fee scheme. And another reason for objection is implementation. I agree with Greenest Action and also Friends of the Earth. You can do more experiments. In fact, now we're experimenting with some hostel students at the university. Students there have asked many questions. They say, if I take out the rubbish to another street, what happens? If we do not comply with the scheme, what happens? So it doesn't matter. Once you try out the scheme, we can try to forge a consensus. I think that is a very precious experience. And people will be educated in the process. I therefore hope that the administration can expedite the fee charging system. Thank you, Mr. Chen Kai-ming. I support fee charging with the commercial and industrial sector for two reasons. One, to suppress the rising trend of C&I waste, and two, through this we can help households lessen their burden. Now I would detail my proposal. We can see that in the objectives by 2022, C&I waste per capita production would just be reduced by 30%, but residents need to reduce their waste by 40%. And on what basis are these indicators produced? In comparing 2000 and 2011, C&I waste has increased by 60%, but household waste has been reduced by 25%. And if we look at the total volume, let us look at 2000 and 2022, and let us make a comparison. C&I waste will not be reduced, but rather the waste volume will be allowed to increase by 30%, but on the other hand, you ask household waste to be reduced by 50%, and that is in 22 years. And then there is another unfair point. By 2022, you ask C&I waste to be reduced by 700 tons per day, but in fact, the facilities are helping C&I waste to be reduced to 570 tons. In other words, if C&I waste has to reach the target in 2022, it should only be reduced by 137 tons per day. So there is very little you ask them to do. On that basis, we should implement the fee charging scheme on the C&I sector, and also the fee should be high. As for household waste, basically, if the administration does not provide more recycling subsidy or assistance, basically there should be no fees charged to households. As I said, from 2000 to 2011, households have done extremely well. Every year, 142 tons have been reduced, and by 2017, the reduction is only for 115 tons. So there is every chance of that being achieved. Look at the present recycling channels, and let us look at government information. We believe we can further reduce waste by 1,257 tons per day, and that is for 2017. What happens after 2017? We would know that we would exhaust all recycling channels. In other words, the fee charging scheme is not going to help you reduce waste. Mr. Denford.
I'd like to start with a story. I recently arrived here in Hong Kong, and one of my first few days here, I was sitting in a cab. We were stopped at some traffic lights. An old man crossed the road just in front of the cab. He was carrying a six-pack of beer in one of those plastic bags you get at the supermarket, which are made for fruit and vegetables, the ones with no handles. Before he made it to the other side, the bag broke. One can of beer drops onto his foot, another drops onto the road and explodes. I didn't think much of this at the time, other than that poor man's bad luck. When I recounted this story to a colleague at the Lion Rock Institute later in the week, He informed me the reason the man was using the incorrect bag was because of the levy the government had placed on the traditional two-handled plastic bags. The reason I tell this story is to remind the government of the abysmal failure of the plastic bag levy. The Lion Rock Institute defiantly opposed this levy and was a lone voice in doing so. The Lion Rock Institute considers itself a friend of the administration, and friends do not let friends go home with bad men or bad advice. The advice we offer is this: the municipal waste charging scheme will go either one of two ways. It will hurt or it will not. If it doesn't hurt, it will not change behaviour. This is what the government professes to be its objective, so then this simply becomes a revenue-raising exercise. Currently, the Hong Kong government holds over $7 billion in fiscal reserves. Therefore, a revenue-raising exercise is unnecessary. If it does hurt, the advice we offer, as friends of the administration, is that this is political suicide. Our forecast is this: once public opinion bounces against this policy, the environmental groups will disappear, just as they did with the plastic bag levy. We liken this policy to the government putting a gun in their mouth and deciding they like the taste of bullets. I would like to conclude by noting there's no winning outcome here. The plan which the Lion Rock Institute proposes is for Hong Kong to export landfill. As land in Hong Kong is scarce, we should export our landfill technology to a place where land is not as valuable. The home country would be able to use the landfill for free and reap the benefits of our advanced technology. The municipal waste charging could be used to subsidise this, but we do not see this as necessary, as if it has no effect on behaviour, the government might as well use a small portion of the fiscal reserves to fund this. Thank you.
環保觸覺何家寶小姐。
Next, Ms. Hon Claudia from Green Sense. The Green Sense is happy to hear that the administration has shown initiative to reduce waste. There are 4 major concerns. Some deputations have covered them, and I do have some views. Our biggest concern is, as mentioned in the paper, that the objective of MSW charging is not cost recovery, but to induce change in people's behavior. And therefore, there must be charging by household, by volume, because all households should share this responsibility to reduce waste. And costs are involved, and enforcement action should be taken to deal with breaches. Apart from hardware, as mentioned in the paper, manpower should also be enhanced. Another division should be set up in terms of compliance. On publicity and education, the administration should do more. In the past, the administration, apart from encouraging schools and the general public to separate waste, to reduce waste, is also very important. The public should be educated on what are recyclables, what are not. For grassroots, the administration should consider providing waivers or exemptions to minimize the opposition. As mentioned by deputations, the recycling industry, as far as their operation is concerned, they're quite simple at the moment. We think this is a good opportunity to expand the green industries and develop the green industries and to promote segments of the industries that may not see immediate economic benefits. We urge the administration to set up second-hand stores at various locations. Apart from waste charging across government departments, the number of rubbish bins should be reduced, and the revenue so generated should be plowed back to green-related initiatives. Through these initiatives, waste reduction can be achieved so that we don't need to extend the landfill or build more incinerators. Next, Ms. Lee Mei Siu from the labor unions of the staff of FEHD. Sorry, speaker's not coming through. Would the microphone please be switched on? Colleagues, Ms. Lee. Yes. The government adopts the thinking of a small government in a big market for the blueprint of use of recycled resources. The most successful way is to implement charging mechanism so that general public would be tricked to take up all the responsibility for improper waste management. Producers are let off lightly. Overpackaging should be reduced. On the other hand, the government tells you that for construction waste, the charging mechanism is a success. In fact, we have a table here. Every year, the FEHD and the Lands Department, AFCD, etc., help remove construction and demolition waste free of charge. They say that Taiwan is a good example, but in fact they install CCTV systems and they also have incentives as well as punishment. For South Korea, they also have strict rules. In fact, administrative fees and prosecution costs have not been factored in, and if the plan is not successful, the levy would go up. And our department has been dealing with waste for decades. If they are of value, they are valuables, they can be recycled by the market itself. Waste can automatically be reduced. And recyclers, here you can see that only glass bottles are in the surplus, not in the case of waste papers, etc. There are also people collecting cardboards in the streets, but we have recycled trucks. They are also part of the recycling industry. We believe that the FHD should be reorganized to help with waste management, and there should be recycled trucks within the department, and industrial buildings should be provided for green industries use. And community organizations and NGOs can also take part in separation of waste. For licensing mechanism, subsidy can be given for the purchase of waste treatment facilities. Next deputation, I'd like to say something on behalf of the Hong Kong Dumper Truck Drivers Association. I'm April Lai. In 2006, C&D waste began to be subject to charging mechanism. As a practitioner in the trade, we saw a drop in the quantity of C&D waste produced. However, we also witnessed fly tipping cases. Fish ponds, agricultural land, they have become black spots for fly tipping. And at RCPs, for example, the RCP at Luat Road, very often we see recyclables being dumped there. So I think if charging is introduced, this will help recycle those waste that can be recycled. But we need a very strict enforcement approach. Now, for example, one would be fined 1,500 for littering. However, around 4 or 5 o'clock at RCPs, I see lots of people disposing huge bags of rubbish right outside the RCPs. So if we are to introduce MSW charging, we need to take a strict approach in enforcing it. on how to encourage the general public to reduce waste. Well, in recycling aluminium cans and glass, etc., we find that amongst the waste we see few paper and paper waste and metallic waste because they are valuables. So we should consider how these can be recycled, and it all comes down to the question of tapping the market. We have 2 shops or 2 operators recycling glass materials into eco-concrete pavers. We have a lot of overseas experience. The point is we don't have innovative ideas on how to recycle them, and we need to do more. MSW charging may be one of the methods to bring in the financial resources. The other important thing is Professor Robert Hansen, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Carbon dioxide feeds the world does not support charging for waste by weight or by quantity. And these 2 approaches have actually got the government and green groups focusing on the wrong aspects of waste. What you need to be looking at is are the poisons and the toxicity within waste itself. Secondly, charging for waste by quantity or weight is going to harm the middle class and the poorest people in society. It's a form of regressive taxation. So what you need to do is to create an environment where people actually want to voluntarily recycle waste in the most effective method. And a suggested way of doing that is, particularly with new apartment blocks, is to have larger waste areas where people can easily separate waste from their own apartments just at the end of the corridor. This is the critical part of it, is separation in the easiest and most convenient way, not by punishing people for doing so, because you just turn people off environmental methods. The waste should then be transported downstairs and put on a train line and moved underground to a separate place where it's sold overseas and traded on world markets, thus getting the waste off Hong Kong. Talking of toxicity, where the government has gone wrong, and I've spoken about this before, is it should not be promoting more poisonous products, particularly light bulbs. LED CFLs are very toxic and very poisonous. They're particularly bad for workers. This is an article in the Sunday Times, which you can see, green light bulbs poison workers. They do. CFL and LED light bulbs are very, very toxic. We should not be encouraging them at all. LEDs are particularly bad. They're also linked to blindness. People may be able to see this. And as for the green groups supporting this, well, they've got a vested interest. The WWF is funded lock, stock and barrel by Philips. No surprises there. Mega Man are also pretty active at promoting, giving money to green groups to promote their policies. What you've got to do is to remove toxic products. So on the light bulb front, this is what I'd like you to do. All CFL and LED lightings to carry images like cigarette packaging, communicating hazardous waste. All CFL and LEDs to list all the toxins they contain. All legal exclusion clauses that light bulb companies have should be printed on bulb packets. Actual CFL and LED light bulbs should have the words toxic product and hazardous waste printed on their packaging. Bulb importers and retailers should pay the cost of collecting and making safe CFL and LED light bulbs, and the removal of the word recycling from those collection points that you have. People are simply not using your CFL and LED collection points because people view them as green. They're not green. That needs to change. And the government should, rather than promoting these bulbs, should issue radio and newspaper warnings about the toxins they contain.
Next, Ms. Yan Shui-Han. Thank you. We support the charging scheme. We believe that C&I waste and household waste should both be subject to charging. We are the Environmental Contractors Management Association. Or else, some people may evade the fees by taking the waste to a different facility. Second, we are of the view that the fees should be reviewed from time to time to provide enough incentive for waste producers to reduce waste at source. Also, we should look at the change in the living standards. So we believe the fees level should be reviewed from time to time. We understand that when the charging scheme is implemented, there will be an increase in recyclables. But right now we do not have enough facilities to take care of recyclables collected. I believe the administration should increase such facilities so that the recycling industry can survive and be a main player in the process, or else the fee charging scheme will become meaningless. The government should also conduct small pilots to try out the scheme. You can choose different types of residential buildings or even shopping centers and commercial buildings so as to collect relevant data and to get to know whether operationally there are any difficulties so that you can draw up a more comprehensive fee charging scheme. As other deputations have been saying, we should do public education and publicity. To allow the fee charging scheme to be successful, you must mount large-scale publicity campaigns and educate the public to reduce waste at source and enhance the public's awareness that they may be prosecuted if they do not comply. I think that is important. And also, there should be more support for the recycling industry. Then your charging scheme will be successful. We also think that before the scheme is launched, there must be a long enough notification period for the public. Different stakeholders, including waste producers and service providers, they should have enough time to get prepared for the scheme because they may have to put together different processes of work. Thank you. Mr. Billy Lee, Hong Kong Food Waste Management Association. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. If we look at Seoul and Taipei, these are big cities and they have been successful in tackling MSW. A fee charging scheme will be a successful or meaningful scheme because it will mean reduction of waste at source. I have heard many views from the industry. I think they have spoken well. But I'd like to make one point. When you have the fee charging scheme, you should also provide an effective subsidy scheme or assistance scheme so that we can have sustainable development. As to how we can monitor the fees charged, will there be a dedicated account set up for it so that it will eventually go back to the recycling industry? Or will the fees charged go into the hands of the conglomerates, just like the plastic shopping bag levy? They are now in the hands of the businesses. So will you collect the fee centrally and then you will approve it for the use by different people, like the ECF, the Education and Conservancy Fund? Before the scheme is launched, you should work with district councils, green groups, and property management companies who will do public education and publicity together with you. Right now, in terms of livelihood and people's financial burden, they may not like the scheme if you don't do a good job. When you launch the scheme, a good deed may become a bad deed in the end. Thank you. Mr. Ngai, the Hong Kong Organic Waste Recycling Center Limited, we are the first education center working on food waste. Over 10,000 people have visited our center, and every time people come in, I would ask them whether they support the MSW charging scheme. Well, that is not a formal interview, but then 70% of people support it. They say, oh yes, let's charge for MSW handling. The Hong Kong Organic Waste Recycling Center now would like to make 3 proposals. Number 1, how to collect MSW, including food waste. We should start with the biggest landowner in Hong Kong, meaning the Hong Kong government. If you dump this to PMCs or other private companies, they will need to undertake more administrative work. Now they have to work with the OCs, they have to handle inquiries from chairmen and other owners. But if you start with a public housing estate under the Hong Kong government, that will be an easy enough starting point. Let us have a pilot. As other deputations have said, you have different modes of charging. You can ask people to buy refuse bags, or you can do it by volume. But every scheme has its pros and cons, so let us start an experiment with a public housing estate. Secondly, how do we manage the waste? Just like the Environment Bureau, which told us that we have 3,600 tons of food waste every day. If today we already separated and we can have food waste as it is, well, yes, but then how are we going to handle it? We have no facility to handle that kind of volume. In Siu Ho Wan, 200 tons, Shaling Phase 2, 300 tons, and then in Echo Park, 100 tons. That's it, 600 tons. In our center, we can handle 50 tons at the maximum. So altogether, not even 1,000 tons capacity. And therefore, you would have to look at how you handle the food waste collected, or else we'll go back to the story of the tricolor bins, because people do the separation of waste, but then the contractor will just dump everything into the landfills. Now, you should make the best use of this opportunity, because it's very seldom that a government policy will receive so much support. Number 3, the fee level. As the administration said, you're not looking to make a profit. More importantly, you need to set up a fund to subsidize the industry so technologies can be developed. If I can have 3,600 tons of food waste, it doesn't mean that tomorrow I would already be able to develop a facility that can handle it. So the fund should first of all support the industry. Next, Hong Kong Women Workers Association with Ms. Wu Mei Lin. Thank you, Chairman. To the public, if you ask us whether you support fee charging, if you say it will help to reduce waste, they will say yes. But if you just say there is a fee to be charged, people will doubt what it is about. The administration emphasized providing an economic incentive. But if you look at the community, there are many recycling vehicle fleets. There are the rag pickers and cleaners who may look for recyclables and sell them. But why is it that recycling is still very ineffective in Hong Kong? If you like to emphasize economic incentives, you will have to investigate into why recycling is not done well, even if there are vehicle fleets doing it. And I can provide the following explanation. If you only rely on the private market and without intervention by government, this is not a solution to the problem, because in the community there is no education and there is no incentive. To the public, they separate the waste, but then in the end they are told that the waste is just dumped into the landfills. And secondly, recyclers are not partners to residents. Sometimes the two are confrontational to each other. And number 3, if you go for fee charging, then I would emphasize that the usable recyclables should still be collected separately. And you should also play a bigger role. You should not just rely on the market. Later on, you may want to refer the responsibility to OCs and the PMCs. Then I would be worried that a market-led effort would become an OC or PMC-led effort. So people will not be mobilized on a large scale. You always mention South Korea and Taiwan and say that they have been extremely successful. But you have to look at these two governments. They also promote social economy in addition to recycling. Hong Kong people embrace that concept, but then you do not promote it enough. We should emphasize whole population participation. If you don't want this to become a nuisance, you must mobilize cleaners, housewives, and even rag pickers instead of just penalizing anybody who doesn't comply with your system. Last, I think the government has this responsibility. You should really strictly implement the producer responsibility scheme. You should not just implement the polluter pays principle, because sometimes we are in a passive position when we consume, when we buy things. We are victims to the packaging by merchants. The last one is you should also include the concept of social economy. Ms. Ho from the Green Women Community Network. We started in Kwun Tong in 2003. We started with plastic bottles. Now we are recycling other matters, including cooking oil, and we are making soap from waste cooking oil. We also have a sewing team because some women can sew. They are recycling banners and racks to produce some products. And last month we interviewed 200 residents in Kwun Tong. And now we can tell you the findings of the survey. With regard to the MSW charging, they think that yes, it can be a way to reduce waste. They also point out that if you have a charging scheme, some people may take the refuse out to the streets and dump them there. And they are of the view that the separation of waste is not done enough in the community, and economically and also work-wise, the women are affected. So they support the concept, but they are worried that if the government does not have a comprehensive plan to do it, even the waste separated will not be handled properly. And in terms of the financial burden, people interviewed would think that you should mandate the use of certain plastic bags and charge by volume. But they want to know even more, and that is how the fees collected would be used. If it is used to provide an incentive to the reuse and recycling industry, then you would receive more support from the public. Amongst the interviewees, they have these strong views. You should also do more by way of producer responsibility. There is excessive packaging, for example, for certain products. And also, you should also legislate to ban the use of foam and excessive packaging of food, because foam cannot be recycled. And also, in the community, you should install recycling systems. If refuse goes only to Tuen Mun, it is not effective. Also, you should encourage the recycling of glass bottles.
Last, Mr. Yang Ho Chun, Harris Young from Liberal Party Youth Committee. Our waste reduction level has exceeded many of the advanced countries, and the landfills in Hong Kong will gradually be saturated in 2020. It is imminent for us to reduce waste, and so far we have focused on waste charging, and the steering committee has launched a consultation exercise on waste charging. However, there are problems, and waste charging is not the is not the only solution. Rates are set by the RNVD according to the annual rentable value on the charging of rates. And rates have gone up in recent years along with property prices, exerting pressure on the general public. If waste charging is introduced, this will cause an extra burden on the shoulders of the general public, and they may not agree with the waste charging, and the government should consider rebating the amount of rates which is equivalent to the amount of fees charged on waste management. And on the 3 R's, the administration has not done enough to promote the recycling industry. The industry is short-sighted. They only focus on paper, metals, and cans, on organic waste treatment and the organic waste treatment facilities and other recyclables. We are only at a very preliminary stage. There is insufficient support for operators at Eco Park. The administration should rethink and draw example from overseas to help the recycling industry's healthy development in Hong Kong. This is how Hong Kong can resolve the problem of MSWs. Next, Ms. Fanny Lee from Greenpeace. Thank you, Madam Chair. Waste MSW is one of the major problems in Hong Kong. It's very close to the daily living of people. Greenpeace thinks that MSW charging is the major solution to reducing waste, and apart from MSW charging, what other ways can the government help in reducing waste? First of all, Greenpeace is of the view that charging should be imposed on all sectors in one go. We must join hands in reducing waste. On household or domestic waste, which affects likely households more, the Greenpeace is of the view that it should be done by household instead of by building. For example, designated bags can be used, as mentioned by some deputations just now, for the charging scheme to take effect, so that the general public will be reduced in will be discouraged in producing waste, and there should be monitoring and punishment penalty mechanism, as well as education. Some concessions can be given, for example, giving free garbage bags to the general public, and we think that MSW charging should be introduced as soon as possible. Apart from charging, however, the administration should also have a basket of supporting measures to resolve the problem of MSW. So far, Hong Kong doesn't have any comprehensive system in dealing with waste. For example, food waste from catering industry, waste paper from industrial sector, and producer responsibility, other issues mentioned by deputations. A holistic review is necessary to provide a carrot and stick approach in solving the problem. Domestic waste. In fact, food waste accounts for a major proportion. There should be on-spot waste, food waste processor, and also there should be agricultural policy so that these composts produced in treating food waste can be reused, and to minimize the risk of having too much waste in Hong Kong. Thank you, deputations and individuals, for coming here and expressing your views. This meeting is scheduled to end at 12. I can extend it by 15 minutes. So, please indicate if you have a lot of questions to ask deputations or government officials. Do you agree to extend the meeting further, or is it okay if we extend it to 12:15? If No, there is no particular indication. I will extend it to 12:15. So members who wish to ask question, please raise your hand. 4 minutes each. Mr. Yik Chi Ming, Gary Fan, Kenneth Leung, Lo Wai Kwok, Michael Tien. Mr. Frankie Yik first. Thank you. Deputations for coming here and expressing your views. Now, the Liberal Party Youth Committee representative already give the views of our party. And apart from MSW charging, the administration has a bigger role to play. That is on how to promote the recycling industry. Now, the Liberal Party has been advocating on the rebate of rates, and property prices have soared over the years. For service industries, when we look at the business volume or the wages, we see that we're lagging far behind. So, Secretary, you should ask the Financial Secretary for more resources. There should be incentives, drawing from the overseas examples. For example, the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Macau has introduced an incentive scheme to promote environmental friendly behavior, and also something like a machine for collecting recyclables, apart from MSW charging. Secretary. Madam Chair, thank you, Mr. Yik, for your comment. Now, through this 4-month consultation exercise, we'd like to seek more views so as to build the basis for our policy formulation. Some talk about carrot and stick, some talk about incentives. We will not rule them out, but recently I have been discussing this issue with some economists. They say that it may not be economically viable to introduce incentive schemes only. That's also the case in overseas examples. We need to take a multi-pronged approach. The more effective way, according to our view, is to have MSW charging. However, I don't rule out the possibility of having some more incentives and measures going in parallel. We'd like to seek more views from members. Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, deputations and individuals, for coming and expressing your views. We are very clear that MSW is a campaign that will involve everyone. The government, however, should take the lead. My party shares the similar views with the Liberal Party. There should be rebate of rates, and it should be charged by household, by volume instead of by building. There should be designated bags. There should be measures to support the industry, and if food waste can be dealt with properly, we can remove obstacles to implementing waste charging. And I also suggest that the administration restructured in a way that FEHD can come under Environment Bureau. I am particularly concerned about the representative of the FEHD Workers' Union. Their paper tells us very specifically the operational details for frontline workers, and these actually determine whether the MSW charging can be acceptable by the public. So I'd like to give 1 or 2 minutes to Ms. Lee Seow Mei to elaborate on the difficulties in para 8 and 9 of your paper. And Secretary, can you also respond to the concerns raised by frontline workers? Thank you. Ms. Lee, actually you have 1 minute. You need to reserve 30 seconds for the Secretary to reply, or you'll be letting him go. Yes, you may begin. The EPD has formulated policies. However, they have never consulted frontline workers. They only send a couple of vehicles to help in the recycling business, and later on we have been asked to take up monitoring. We see a lot of problems. There are syringes and other sort of waste in the recycle bins, and there is no channel for us to express our views. Recycling of glass is good, but the setting up a bin is again facing opposition because it's not part of our responsibility. And there are also allegations of fly tipping. However, there is no mentioning of increasing manpower to deal with the problems. What about the waste so discarded? Any resources to collect them? Nothing. It is paper. For frontline workers, it's really a great concern for us, because there is hygiene problem for the waste so dumped, and people's health would be affected. And we don't permit reception of food waste from C&I sector. And earlier on, there was a pilot scheme of installing a machine at the RCP for dealing with food waste. And this is not mentioned in the law. I think it is a good spot that RCPs be used as a spot for separating waste. However, there is also a regulation forbidding the separation of waste at RCPs, so there are contradictions. Secretary, thank you for the comment and questions, and I read the paper of this union last night. This is important. This is a 4-month consultation exercise. Although it may not be in the paper, we'd like to listen to the views of frontline workers. I'm sorry, Secretary, your time is up. Dr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, deputations, for coming to this panel to express your views. Many have talked about a fundamental problem. MSW charging is not about increasing government revenue. Some say that if the level of fees are not high enough, it may not be strong enough to induce a change in people's behavior. And one of the deputations say that this is political suicide. In fact, after its introduction, if you do a correlation exercise analysis, you can find that, in fact, waste is reduced, but you haven't gauged non-quantitative factors. For example, in Taiwan or in South Korea, people's behavior hasn't actually reduced simply because of the levy, which may be just tens of dollars. It's out of their love for the country that they do it. So the question is whether the charging scheme can actually induce a change in people's behavior. And we also talked about the pros and cons of charging waste by household and by building. And I'd like to know whether at this moment there is any inclination as far as the government is concerned. And I heard that every day 80 or 90 tons of food waste is dumped by supermarkets. And we have food banks. Can we transfer food that can still be fit for consumption to food banks?
I think Dr. Tam can supplement to the second question, but let me take up the third question first. Through the Eat Smart campaign, supermarkets are already donating food, and you can see some changes taking place. As for the first question, through the quantity-based charging scheme and also education and also supporting recycling industry, then we can achieve a combined result. The blueprint has also made the estimate that everything we do will come together to help reduce the waste to be treated at the terminal point. Professor Tam, thank you. The Council on Sustainable Development has conducted public consultation for 2 months, and we are clear that in the commercial and industrial sector, they like to do it by quantity, but as for households, whether it should be by household or by building, there are diverse views. People think that it is most fair if you do it on the basis of household, and that is the best economic incentive. Together with Mr. Bernard Chan, we support the household charging. We think it is fairest. But talking to other stakeholders, perhaps implementation-wise, this may not be feasible at the start. As we have heard, there could be fly tipping as a result. So perhaps at the beginning, we don't start with charging by household, and there may be a transition period. And in other places, there could be charging by building. But in the end, it should be charging by household. However, our consultation period does not end until the 24th of January. We will consider more views before we write a final recommendation. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, can you hear me? Yes. I'd like to thank the deputations for their valuable views. The mainstream view, as I gather, well, yes, of course, there are people for or against the charging scheme. However, it seems the mainstream view is that there should be a comprehensive launching involving residents as well as the C&I sector at the same time, and that there should be by volume, by household. Now, I am concerned a little about the submission from the FEHD staff with regard to the prosecution figures, etc. If I look at the figures, there have been a few thousand complaints and also double-digit prosecution. In other words, just 1 to 2% prosecution cases. Can the Secretary please explain why you have such a low successful conviction figure? And I'd like to point out one figure in particular, and that is illegal filling of ponds. You issued 903 statutory notices, but only 2 persons have been prosecuted for illegal filling. I have also heard many deputations say that if it is going to be by household, we should distribute plastic bags, and this has been tried out and been found to be successful in other places. But what about large pieces of refuse? If it is a waste, electrical and electronic products, you have another scheme, that is the WEEE scheme. But what about large pieces of household refuse which cannot be put into a plastic bag? Can you explain that technical issue as well? Yes, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Lo. With regard to fly tipping of construction waste in rural areas, I think that has been discussed, and you will understand that we are drafting a piece of legislation. We are almost finished with the drafting work. So frontliners will be able to prosecute with more success, and also we could, I think, prevent the fly tipping of such materials in rural areas. Secondly, other kinds of waste. Let me take the opportunity to supplement. In this legislative session, our team has been working very hard on different producer responsibility schemes, including expanding the shopping bag levy, the bottle glass responsibility, and also the WEEE. These are about producers and other stakeholders. As for large piece of refuse, we understand that after having the quantity-based charging scheme, other countries also have a supplementary scheme to deal with this. Let us work on the main fee charging scheme first, and then we will attend to large pieces of household waste. That will be handled by another measure. Chairman, if you launch the fee charging scheme, you should not just look at food waste and other waste that can be put in a plastic bag. You must think ahead about large pieces of household waste. I think you should propose ways to deal with them. Mr. Michael Teen. Chairman, many deputations have expressed support for the fee charging scheme, and they have said that it should be best done by household. Just now, Ms. Yan and also Mr. Wong, I think you're still here. I hope you will go back and think through the details of implementation and let us know your stance. Because now, almost 90% of households live in 10-story high buildings or even higher. If you talk about charging by household, there will be a lot of expenditure. You may have to have CCTV, management fees, etc. If you do not have a good enough monitoring scheme, then people will discontinue the buying of plastic bags and everybody will just dump their refuse at other people's doorsteps, and in the end you may have to charge by building. But I'd like to have asked Professor Tam a question, because Secretary, you have asked Professor Tam to answer the question anyway. You said Mr. Bernard Chan and you are more inclined to charge by household. But the other time, Mr. Bernard Chan said there would not be the necessity to increase management fees or installation of CCTV. Would you be too optimistic, Professor Tam? If you are going to charge by household, you must be able to implement it fairly, and that would involve a lot of investment. How can your ideal be achieved? Well, it is not I who said that there needed not be the increase in management fees, but I think I understand Mr. Bernard Chan. If you look at Taiwan and South Korea, they don't have CCTV all over the place. As deputations have said, it is important to do public education and education, and it's about public awareness, just like the plastic shopping bag levy of 50 cents. Somehow, people are not paying 50 cents for a plastic bag. They are taking their own bags with them because they experience peer pressure. And I think we should reinforce the awareness that we should dump refuse in a proper and lawful way. This is our long-term vision. And in certain places, people have this heightened awareness, so people are not breaking the law, and in the end, you don't have to do a lot of monitoring. Just like the Friends of the Earth representative who said the same thing. Okay, I have heard you. Can I interject? No, we are talking about a transitional period. In a building, there can be a heightened environment perception, so you can do it by household. And in the end, 20 to 30% of people dump their refuse elsewhere without taking the responsibility. Then what are you going to do? Well, it depends on the legislation then. Some people say if people do it, then the PMC might need to purchase bags and make up for what these people don't do. This is proposed by some people. But are you confident about a dual-track method? If there is heightened awareness in certain buildings, you can start with household charging, and you can grant it that there would be 20-30% illegal tipping. Well said, please. In fact, we are talking about a two-step approach. If there is heightened awareness in a certain building, we can start with household charging. If not, we can go for building charging. No, this is not what I mean. I am saying there should only be charging. Well, actually, I'm saying we can charge every building and then every household. Well, yes, some people have proposed that method. I think you should investigate into this, because I think that would be the best way for you to soft land the scheme. We have this meeting until the 12:15. We can have 4 more minutes. Just now, the Council on Sustainable Development and the Secretary have not been given a time to give an overall response to the deputations. Now the time is for you, Mr. Secretary. Please be brief because we always see you. And please leave more time for the Council on Sustainable Development. Professor Tam. In fact, I'd like to thank the deputations. We are very happy when the Council received the government's request to do a second stage consultation. The government said last year there was 60% support. The chairman and I did not have a lot of confidence, but after today, we know that, as deputations have said, the public have thrown their weight behind a comprehensive waste management policy, and reduction of waste at source is such an important segment, and the fee charging scheme would be an economic incentive. In fact, the administration is not looking to increase the fund of the treasury. The money will indeed be plowed back into recycling, but it may not be in the form of a dedicated fund. We expect the money to dwindle because if the awareness is heightened, there would be less refuse to be charged. So I hope the administration will show the resolve to help the recycling industry. I agree with you that we should have an organic package, including the recycling industry, which can make profit, and then in the end we will have less refuse to dump. I hope you will remember that the less rubbish you produce, the lesser you pay, and in the end we hope very few people will have to pay. Number 2, I support you saying that we must communicate and educate the public. If we do not have civic awareness, if we do not have the support of stakeholders, including frontliners, we are not going to be able to do it. So the law should be clear. We should have resources for engaging manpower. And number 3, I don't think there can be a clear-cut approach that can be launched overnight. As some members have said, perhaps we can launch different schemes at the beginning, so we will see which one will prove to be meaningful and successful. And also we should support the low-income earners. They may not produce a lot of refuse, but then $10 odd will still mean a lot of burden for them. We will try to find a good way to do it. Some people say there could be a baseline drawn up, or below which people do not have to purchase the bags, or the SWD can give back the subsidy to these people. But then what is important is that everybody has a responsibility to tackle waste. Hong Kong lags behind neighboring countries and cities by over a decade. I am sure we have a very good public awareness in Hong Kong, but we should not stop doing what we should do just because of short-term difficult problems. I hope the administration can show the resolve. And of course, we cannot expect 100% support right from the beginning, especially when you're talking about the environment. But today we hear a lot of support, and I hope the administration will really come out and say it, and as people say, as soon as possible to launch a scheme that is feasible but not disturbing to the public. Secretary, thank you for giving me the time. 30 seconds for the Secretary. Chairman, I'd like to thank the deputations for their very precious views. Number 2, we have the determination to work with you to launch quantity-based charging. This has a good leverage effect because we can then reduce waste. But then we do not only rely on this one measure. The blueprint includes Eat Smart, education, recycling support, and also other incentives, so we can tackle waste in Hong Kong. Between now and legislation, we are talking about a time span up to 2016, and I'm sure we have time to iron out the details and come up with a package of measures, including monitoring and also maybe changing government mechanisms so that we will have smooth operation of the scheme. At the beginning of next year, we will have a pilot scheme. We'll be trying out the scheme by selecting certain buildings and places so we can have a more perfect scheme when it is launched. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you very much, deputations, and also members for attending the meeting. The meeting is adjourned here. Thank you very much.